Okay, let's get on with this. I'm going to sort of publicly debrief myself on the exchange that I had with Unwanted because I've already somebody else asked me about this, and so I've already sort of made up judgments about it. Although, I mean, obviously, I haven't passed them by Unwanted Contriver, so I don't know what his views will be. So I just want to make this public, a confession, I guess. So where I see the issue with Unwanted Contriver, from my perspective, is that, and this, in my view, it came out already in the exchange, um, but he doesn't see it because essentially I think that the whole political edge of Mitgau is a cover for obviously some kind of personal trauma, which is, let's say, inherited from a whole cultural normalization of conditions. So I think that this is, like a culture specific, or let's say a culturally contextualized sort of stigmatization. That his culture has been affronted by this alien ideology that's come from the outside, which to my mind is slightly paradoxical because his own views, in my opinion, are very Western, but then he mixes and matches, he picks and chooses. So he believes in mutual exploitation, and then he says that he's not doing Hegelian thesis synthesis, sorry, thesis antithesis, thesis thesis antithesis synthesis. I'm sorry, you said I don't know the Hegelian formula because Hegel just came up with those three steps, and then he spoke volumes on philosophy. But you don't have to do any of that if you just understand alchemy, because alchemy is sort of 5 or 6 steps or 7 steps. And then it depends on how you actually do it in the particular, and then you either need the other steps or you don't, or you go back and fill them out, and that's sort of part of the sort of the organic alchemical, um, because when you do alchemy, the product of alchemy doesn't actually tell you the truth. It gives you a metaphorical truth. So it's like a meditation. The whole thing is just a meditation, and you end up with a metaphor. And then you still have to integrate that metaphor into the water of your life, the teaching of your life, the proper right thing to do in the context. And if you don't know which parts of the context, which facts are prevalent and salient and relevant, you're going to cuck yourself, which is figuratively and literally what is happening in this instance, I believe. But I think that maybe Unwanted Contriver knows that he's cucking himself on some level, because there is a kind of, maybe Jung would call it the spiritus mundi or something like that, that there is, or, in the collective unconscious, that there is, that this is a self inflicted wound, but we do this to ourselves. Okay, this is really esoteric shit now, and I'm talking above everybody's head. Now I'm talking in the metaphor of metaphors. So this is sort of two layers of abstraction above. So do we go higher like that, and then we're talking theosophy or whatever, or shall we, let's ground ourselves rather in the context. So, Modi, the Indian prime minister, must be, or president. If they have a Westminster system, then I guess they only have a prime minister. I mean, Modi is even, I think, the answer to this. Or go full Western, and then like even according to Unwanted Contriver's own assessment. I mean, like, this is what I said to Good Mother when I was on her channel. I was like, don't call them crazy bitches. Don't, like, don't take, what's the word? Something, the goat. Like, don't take the goat. Like, don't toy with the scapegoat. Instead, what you do is you overshoot them or something like that. And I'm that's not it's got nothing to do with hurting people. That's a figurative metaphor, And this is the problem: is that they don't like our metaphors. They want to impose their will on their view on other people. They want to say, no, 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 you speak the way I expect you to speak. Which is very contemptuous in a liberal society. So you either believe in a liberal society, or you believe in following the natural law, which is really got nothing to do with nature. It has to do with the normalized conditions of your upbringing, which is also a bit of an abstraction. But natural law is what people do in etiquette on the street corner. And if you break the natural law, a whole community will rise up and they will start rioting and threatening you. Now, anyway, so like whenever people rise up against their elite and then they cannibalize them or they decapitate them or they overthrow the aristocracy or something like that, or maybe to prevent that a tyrant comes in, so it's like there are all these things that happen and they kind of have a natural predicate to them. They have a natural feeling about them, but depending on what the actual diagnosis of the problem is, it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. It's not like Trump is good. I believe Trump is good for America. I believe Modi is good for India. I don't think Julius Malema is good for South Africa. And I'm not being inconsistent. Like, hear my substantiation. Okay, so because both Trump and Modi are playing both sides, because they're basically saying, like, become Hindu then, like like if you want comfort in tradition, then you have to be a real Hindu. And I think that the problem is that, well, Hinduism does have a lot of things in it which I don't like. But that's like saying Christendom has a lot of things in it that I don't like, which is true. I don't like a lot of things in so-called Christendom, I think. But let's look at true religion, and let's like look at a true, and if you actually look at the text of the Bhagavad Gita translated into English by Prabhupada, and or actually, I don't know if it was written by Prabhupada, it was probably written by somebody else in his order, and it was a beautiful translation, and I wrote the purports for it in consultation with many people, and I chose the people that I consulted with, and they certainly had a wealth of knowledge. We even discovered some things about the language, I would say, in these collaborative studies. And I believe that I wrote all the purports in the Bhagavad Gita. Um, anyway, that's not important. But I was even going to take reference to Unwanted Contriver and talk about some of the passages in this, because I mean, they're, like I used my book of quotations and I quoted Heraclitus, I think. And anyway, I mean, just the first, like, I went through the whole Gita and I just put up flags all over the place. And, I put up notes right at the front, so like I wrote over and below the heading Bhagavad Gita as it is. That's how it's translated into English. I don't know, obviously, how to say it in whatever Sanskrit language that is, or Vedic language. I can't read that, so I read the English. Bhagavad Gita as it is. And the Gita's got all these funny things on it, like notations and things. And then I wrote in pencil below that. So this is my version of the Hindu scripture. I've already scribbled on it. I've already made my own notes on it, because I'm a scholar, I guess. And I wrote, they shouldn't call it pure devotee syndrome. They should call it, unfallen world syndrome. So I would say that that's the problem, that because I talk to everyone in every religion and I try to learn and understand, and I really do like probably the Hare Krishnas the most, because they claim to be monotheistic, although it's hard to tell, because some people in their order, you speak to them and they're very clearly not monotheistic. So but isn't that the same in every sort of exoteric church that one comes across? Because they also are trying to cater to householders. So they're a little bit, maybe they're a bit being a bit promiscuous in that sense. And when householders get a hold of religious things, then sexual immorality starts happening as well. But anyway, so I said they shouldn't call it pure devotee syndrome. They should call it unfallen world syndrome. So maybe the mixture of those two is a kind of drama that means that there's something wrong with the teaching. Maybe that's why sexual immorality sometimes happens in close quarters, is because there is actually something wrong in the environment, and you are recreating it in the microcosm, what lives in the macrocosm, as above so below, or as in the Christian scripture it says, what does it say? What is bound on the earth is bound up in heaven, and what is loosened on the earth, no, it's the opposite. I can't remember exactly. Anyway, let me read the Gita right now. So it says here, By the evil deeds of those who destroy the family tradition and thus give rise to unwanted children, all kinds of community projects and family welfare activities are devastated. Now let's move on. I'm not going to even read the purport for that. Let's move on to the next one. O Krishna, maintainer of the people, I have heard by disciplic succession that those whose family's traditions are destroyed dwell always in hell. Now, what is perhaps unclear in me just taking out these two things out of context, because that is the 42nd and 43rd pieces of text. It just says text here. So they're not even verses, they're just called texts, and they have numbers on them. Now let me read the purport for this 43rd text. Let's see what it says here in the purport. Purport. Arjuna bases his argument not on his own personal experience, but on what he has heard from the authorities. So now we know from the purport that the person who is saying these things is someone who is asking after Krishna, is someone who's in conversation with Krishna. So this text is not coming from the mouth of Krishna, it's coming from the mouth of a would-be follower who is trying to learn from a teacher. This is the discussion between a teacher and a student. So he's asking this as a question, even though in the text it's phrased as a statement, essentially. I don't know if that comes through in the original language. Obviously, I can't read the Vedic script. So it says, purport. Arjuna bases his argument not on his own personal experience, but on what he has heard from the authorities. So he's testing his teaching that he inherited. That is the way of receiving real knowledge. One cannot reach the real point of factual knowledge without being helped by the right person who is already established in that knowledge. There is a system in the, I can't read that word, institution by which, before death, one has to undergo the process of atonement for his sinful activities. I think in Buddhism we might call that dharma. One who is always engaged in sinful activities must utilize the process of atonement called, I'll try to, prayaskita. So the process of atonement called prayaskita, which I might be completely butchering because I don't know what the accent notation on the letters, how they're pronounced. Without doing so, one surely will be transferred to hellish planets to undergo miserable lives as the result of sinful activities. And then I believe, I'm not going to continue reading the Gita, but I believe that I have read it before. Obviously, I read it when I was doing all these purports, so I feel like I know it like the back of my hand. So I don't know it, I can often quote elements of it, and I can, if anyone quotes me anything, I can tell you what I think about it, and what I think about it will often line up exactly with the purport, because that's what happens when you work on something and you know it intimately. And I know the actual, there are lots of things that are hidden in the Gita there. Like there is one thing there. So basically, Krishna says that essentially the line of disciplic succession has been adulterated, and that he reappears in order to revive it essentially from time to time is kind of the gist of it. And so he does say that there are oath breakers and things like that. But then there is some truth there though, because essentially the first verse that I wrote, the first verse that I read is an issue about, it says unwanted population. And that's an important keystone in meditating on duty. Because if you actually want to have a true spirituality and you are going to do it in the realm of spirituality, that means that you are a truth seeker and you know that you don't know the truth. So if you're spiritual, that means that either you're going to be an ashamed agnostic and you want to get rid of your agnosticism, or you're a settled agnostic, in which case you're going to dabble in faiths and you're going to mix and match and mix them together, which is in my view, what Unwanted Contriver has done in order to come to the conclusion, this very sociological kind of piece of, and sociology is the amoral knowledge of the world. Sociology is true, but it's amoral. So you have to take it not with a pinch of salt. If you use it, you are importing salt that you know not what, because you're taking a thematic you're taking a kind of a lateral. I'm just trying to think of a fucking strange metaphor. It's like you take a book and you chop it in half, but like not half the pages. I mean, like you go down the middle. You cut through all the pages halfway, and you only read up. It's like in when I was talking to Unwanted Contriver, you couldn't see my whole face. You could only see half my face because, Contriver was there, and he was taking up half the screen, but we couldn't see his face. So my face was obscured. You could only see half my face, and I was existing in half the screen, and the other half of the screen was just a static image, was just a dead image, was just frozen. Sorry to be, am I being too poetical here in my underhanded am I being indirect here? Isn't that a bit nasty to be indirect? Isn't it better just to sort of say things directly, or to be nondescript? Isn't that the polite way to go about it? And I'm a British person, and Ramesh, I'm saying the wrong word. I'm so bad with names because, on his birth certificate, his name is Jonathan because his parents went to India, and he does this whole comic routine. It's pretty funny, but it's tragic. It's tragic. It's quite tragic because he's basically throwing his parents under the bus. He's saying, look at what my parents did. They thought that this was a reasonable way to go about raising me by giving me sort of a half-bred, two-world, kind of existence here. And he's just talking about it from the British perspective because he is British essentially. And he was just talking about how hard it is that when he goes to Sri Lanka, that all the people there, they expect him to speak the language, and he doesn't speak the language. And so like he doesn't connect with them, and then he doesn't like gel with them when, like, because he doesn't understand how their marriages work, because like the wife says yes, 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 I'm fat, after the husband made fun of her, and he doesn't know what's going on because like maybe the husband understands a little bit of English and the woman doesn't, and so she doesn't even know what she's saying, but she's doing a joke with him to play a prank on this kid who's a foreigner who doesn't speak the language, so he's out of the loop. So they're actually like they're elbowing him that he doesn't understand the code, that he doesn't understand their way of life, and he's looking at it from an outsider, and he can't, because someone has to learn somebody else's language at the end of the day. Is I mean, that's probably what or maybe it's not just learn the language, you have to sort of speak it as well. If you don't speak it, it's not enough. I mean, it was weird. I mean, I was taught Afrikaans my whole life, my whole school career, and it always seemed I could understand the emotion of the person. I felt like I could be emotionally telepathic with everything that they said, but I had no idea what the fuck that they were talking about. Like I would just get visions. Like as soon as people spoken to me in Afrikaans, I would just see things in my head. I would like literally I would go straight into daydreaming. I would like, it was just like a trip. It was like literally it was like the melody, the background music. It's interesting. And she was telling me, oh, you should look at the Cape Coloured community and look at their dialect because they speak like, they speak their own version of Afrikaans, and because they call it a Kombuis language because it's spoken over in the kitchen when people are preparing work in the kitchen, and you have because in the olden days there were a lot of people because everything was more communal, and so there were big kitchens and a lot of people working in kitchens, and then you would develop the language. They were developing their own lingua franca. I think that's the correct French term of conjoined. Anyway, so it kind of the language becomes very that if the core of the language is cooked up in the kitchen, that that it's decentralized. That it's coming from the bottom up, essentially. Anyway, so I mean, India's got a lot of different dialects, I mean, I couldn't believe that he said that their parliament has got like 21 languages and that they actually don't follow each other that well. I mean, and that in my view is utterly terrible. I mean, China actually cares about cohesion because they know the cost of not having cohesion, and they actually did the bloody work of concocting a completely new language. So what they did was what the Chinese did to try to make peace in their land, even though the Cantonese are like by far outnumbered by the Mandarin speaking peoples. And there are lots of also there are many dialects in China. China has got a huge population. So what they did was, to be fair, they invented a new language in Parliament. Sorry, in their I don't know what it's called, in their People's Republic and Congress. So in the Chinese People's Republic, Congress, I don't know if I'm saying the right thing. Um, they speak the political language, and the newspaper of politics is written in that language so that the people have access. If they care about politics, they read that newspaper, and then they know what's going on. I mean, I don't know how much freedom there is. I don't know how decentralized that is. I don't know if like anyone can just write an article in that newspaper, if they have to submit an article to an editor, if they have a dissident section. Like I don't know, like how if like you because obviously they don't like people they don't like celebrities, thinking that they can change this society. But maybe if you maybe I don't know how free the press is or how not free the press is. That would be interesting to actually do an investigation on that to see, like how much lateral freedom is there within the official structure, because it's very easy to use the culture as a front, to take affront to something, to take offense to something, and you don't even know what's behind it, because maybe there's a distance in vocabulary, there's a distance in context, there's a difference, in a lot of things. And they said there's a politics of who should know what, who should learn. Should you learn to tolerate someone who is below you in age, below you in knowledge, or should they learn to be taught, should they learn the necessity of, because this is the problem in South Africa, by the way. I mean, I can make a huge parallel here, is that we think that we have a racial problem. We really have a cultural problem. And I think that the whites are actually correct on this cultural problem, because Africa has a kind of cultural poverty, quite frankly. I mean, they're very rich in many, many things. They really are. They're very civilized, they're very intelligent in so many things. But there's something about having your history arrested in a state of arrested development, because when Western people started doing stuff in Africa, there was already stuff going on, and we don't know what would have played out between the Zulu and the other tribes. We don't know if they sort of settled into a peace or if there was going to be a slow kind of attrition, because like how Africa does war is very dynamic, is very like um, we don't know if the Zulu kingdom was planning essentially just to shock the system, to go into everyone's backyard and fuck with them, and then sue for peace afterwards. You first show people that you have the might to take, and then later on you let it cool off a bit, and then maybe you make negotiation afterwards. I mean, we don't know what the plans of the Zulu were, what the Zulu nation was. Were they here to assimilate the other people into a single nation? But that was interrupted. That if history was left without outsiders coming in, that is likely, like what would have happened. So that. So essentially, because white people went into the Cape, they did their own thing. They were doing their own thing, and other things were going on. So we don't know. History is different now. Well, history is co-created. So the thing is that I really think that this frame of reference is social justice warrior bullshit artistry 101 hypocrisy. Like, why do you assume that Europeans coming to Africa is unnatural or artificial? Why isn't that part of the natural law? Why isn't international um, immigration, why isn't that part of the natural law? You are picking and choosing your natural law, and you're using that as a kind of, because you don't even know what law is to begin with, but you think that you can sort of use natural law. Now, let me tell you where natural law is toxic. It's toxic to do with the salt. Now, the salt is the dialect. There's Everything can be described as a dialect. You can say that yes, yes, yes. It's like gender is kind of like gender. I don't think actually is a dialect. It's actually more complicated than that, and I can actually explain it in detail. But that's a separate matter. That's my psychology, and it's going to derail me if I focus in on that here. But as soon as you create a dialectical model of something, you are being salty about something, and that if somebody says, "No, I don't like your salt. I don't like the cut of your jib," then our salt does not correspond. So either one of us migrates away, or we find a place that we can call home, where we will be the salt of the earth in that part of the earth. So maybe if you aren't being appreciated, then you need to fuck off and find a different, vocation in life. Maybe it's is it you or is it me? That's what they say in relationships, don't they? I can't tell, is it you or is it me or is it us? Or is it the environment? Because is it like what's going on in the news right now? Like do we have different views on what's going on? Like are we not on the same page? It says in the kind of Christian culture, like I believe maybe there's I have not meticulously read the Bible, because that was done for me by my evangelist friend that I was recovering the doctrine with. And what he did, because he read it multiple times, and every time he would tell me, "This is what you don't understand. This is what you don't understand. You don't understand how this fits together." Um, and I would say, "Well, then school it to me," And then so he would teach me, and then I would argue with him, and then I would make a suggestion to him, and I would say, "Go find if it doesn't say this." I would actually do the alchemical process. I would do thesis, negation, and then understand the part of negation that is denial, but then you have to come back around to that question and then sort of run it again. And then sort of generally the third step, I wrote this down. I'm doing this off the top of my head now, so it's a bit risky. You could generally call it synthesis, but what it really is oh my word, this is all going. You see. Uh, anyway, the point is that I mean, so it's got putrefaction, purification, which together make up synthesis maybe, and then it's got maybe you could call it distillation or meditation, or like you can kind of you know you can make it up as long as, but it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day you're just going to be left with a picture. You're going to render a picture which is going to be made out of water, and how much water does it, how much water can you hold? Like some people can only hold so much water in their body, blah blah. I mean, as a natural sort of thing. I mean, some people, maybe the problem is that their brain is undeveloped because they're fucking vegetarians. Like maybe the problem is the diet. I mean, but like I think that, I mean, it's maybe a whole combination of things that keep on reinforcing each other. But when you are on the street and you're trying to get to work and there's a cow that's stopping you from getting to work. I mean, oh wait, I should have asked Unwanted Contriver this, because I don't even know if this is true or not. Because I mean, when I think of India, the picture that I get in my head is that there's a cow in the middle of the road and no one is allowed to make the cow move. You just have to respect it. And if you're a little kid and you try to move the cow, then an old auntie will come up to you and say, "You don't talk to the cow like that. You don't leave the cow alone." And because she's the holy cow. She's the holy cow. It's not, it's not the say. It's that little grandma or whatever. That's everything is centered around what the grandma thinks. And if you want to stop these little girls and you want to get them back in line, get their grandmas to give them a schooling. Or if they can actually say no to their own grandma, then maybe they've actually grown up. They're more like men now. They're more self-confident. Because I mean, like, if you can disagree. I mean, I disagreed with my father, and I loved my grandparents because I guess my grandparents were further away from me. So whenever I was around them, it was like a holiday. They treated me like a royal. Because they were sort of, they had more free time, and and they were at the point of their life, you know. So I mean, obviously, my parents probably had it worse because you know my grandparents were probably trying to do stuff. I mean, I say that. I mean, I only know three quarters of my grandparents because, for instance, like my grandmother lived around me. She was divorced from my grandfather on my father's side, so you know there was a divorce in the family there, and my father was as my grandfather was living with a second wife in another city in another province in the country. So he was off on the side there um, with his new wife, and I did go and visit them a few times, but you know obviously it was quite the distance was quite high. But you know he had a wonderful wife, and it was wonderful getting to know her. You know, and you know like I never called her Grandma Sylvie, but I always you know I was always very fond of her. You know, but I you know I just called her Sylvie. Um, but I said it in my view, in my heart, I said it sort of in the same way that I spoke to all my other grandparents, because she could actually tell me things, like you know, because she was much more open with me than and you know, she told me things about France, you know, like she told me so many things, and you know, obviously I didn't know that much, and I only had limited exposure, but because you know, like she always wanted to live. She is French, and she always wanted to live in South Africa. She wanted to live in Durban more than France. She just loved South Africa. She loved Igoli, Place of Gold, was her favorite show on television. You know, like that, or you know, she just loved South African culture. She just always wanted to live here. And then essentially, when my grandfather first died, then we eventually got it arranged that she went back to France because then she could be taken care of in the French public system, and it sort of broke her heart because she always asked, "Please, can you take me back to South Africa? Please, can you import me to South Africa?" And we're like, "We're sorry, Sylvie, we can't afford it. You know, we can't afford to keep you. You know, because we don't have the money. You know, if we were rich, you know, I mean, if I had the spare capital, I would help her out. I mean, that's her wish. You know, and but I mean, I don't have the money. But anyway, you know, and that was sort of always her intention. That was always her domicile. She was domiciled in South Africa, and she was made a foreigner against her will because of money. Essentially, she couldn't afford to live here. But I mean, it was interesting because when she lived here, she had Mavis was. I mean, I don't know what because she was just Mavis to me, but she taught her to cook, and she was. I mean, you know, I don't know what the title is. Domestic servant, or I mean, like, I mean that's what you know. Some people call them domestics or something like that. Housekeeper, but I mean, my housekeeper. I asked her, um, you know, like, what is your job description? Like, what do you call your job? And she said, you know, I'm a domestic servant. That's how I advertise my services, because she works at the house. Uh, I think 4 times a week in the mornings. So I don't know where else she works, or if she is employed as much as she wants to be employed. But I believe she works at other places as well. You know, so she's very industrious, uh, and she leads her life. You know, I mean, you know, whenever you know, so I know about her children's schooling, and I know the principal of that school, and I'm not so happy with his performance. Um, but there's only so much you can do to interfere and to try to improve things. You know, like I mean, I think this is the curse of the whites in a culture, is that we do not tolerate poverty. We do not normalize poverty. We want it to end. We want things to look better for people. Maybe it's maybe it's Christendom. Like we have a kind of idea of charity, but we don't want to give charity when it's going to helping the problem. We only want to give charity when it's helping the solution. Well, at least that's me. I mean, actually, that's not true. Other people, as long as they look like they're doing the right thing, it's good enough for them. That I can't fucking tolerate, because you're subsidizing corruption. Essentially, you are, but you don't know what you're doing when you're doing it. You don't know what you don't know, and especially when there are private things involved. I mean, like, I can tell you personal stories, but I don't want to upset anyone's. I'm just giving what I can what I feel I can share from my side. I'm not going to go into the details of things. Anyway, so there are all these backstories and contexts and things like that, and that really changes things. But at some point, we need to have some kind of even keeled standard, and sometimes we want to raise the standard. Um, and there are many reasons why people don't want the standard to be raised, because then you're going to make somebody's life, they're going to have to change it, and because they had a fixed routine around a certain stability, around a certain dialectical mass that was ionically, this is a chemical metaphor, they had tethered themselves to a belief. How do I say this? To a quid pro quo, that they were going to be a proprietor. This is also what I wanted to talk about with Contriver in the Griever, because Unwanted Contriver in the Gita. Because if you look at the Gita, do you know how much it complains about the proprietorship of spiritual proprietorship? That if you are a spiritual proprietor, and the reason, I mean, like, look, I'm going to talk now in general. I mean, I have been talking in generalities as well. When I was talking to Contriver, I was talking in generalities, and I didn't probably technically say that. But I think that if you look at the context, you will see that I knew that I was saying a generalization when I was saying it, and I wasn't relying on it as a universal. There are distinctions between universals and generalizations. And we are allowed to have low resolution images of things so long as that we know that they are morally not actionable, as it were. That we cannot say, oh, well, that's the natural law, I can do what I want. Now, the thing that I don't like about the social justice warrior cult is that they are dishonest. They won't actually allow themselves. They are following strict guidelines and a strict code. In fact, they're not following guidelines. They're obviously not following guidelines. Well, actually, I mean, I don't know, because I haven't read those books, but that Unwanted Contriver was telling me about. But I think obviously it's a game that they are playing, and what's the point? Um, and I keep on underlining that the people that you have to worry about are the people who are synthesizing prescriptions, because it's the social justice warrior that actually tells you what should be happening in the world today, that you have to worry about, because all social justice warrior does is it clears the air. It's actually stopping people from actually doing anything in the realm of the four winds, that of the earth have been put to a standstill, so that no one is allowed to produce new doctrine, except people that keep on sort of recycling, trying to synthesize don't look into the abyss. Don't look at the social justice warriors. They're holy cows. Get her away from it. Get around it. You should just call them grandmas. Like, oh, are you a grandma? Like, oh, I didn't realize that you identified as a grandma. And they'll be like, don't assume how I identify. Okay, grandma. That's how you get around it. It's like, and then if she starts getting bitchy and she starts getting testy, it's like, oh, I didn't know you were a man. You're so testy now. And then you say, what? And then you say, holy cow, holy cow! I think it's over. I think I better leave. Like I've done something wrong. Like, is this what you want from me? You want me to do this song and dance? You want me to play this game? Like, I'm sorry, I want to get serious. And then they take everything in the literal. They take everything in the literal. What you say to a woman, they'll hold you to it. It's fucking crazy. I mean, it's like they're machines. And they're doing this why? Because there are little boys out there who are just little boys and they're pretending to be Big Daddy. That's a fucking problem. Grow up. So I'm not making a reference to Big Daddy Liberty. Big Daddy Liberty is doing the right thing. I'm not giving him an underhanded snipe. Sichle Ungubani, Ungube. Sorry, I haven't heard him say. I've heard him say. You see, this is the problem. We're not allowed to say each other's names, and we're not allowed to get them wrong. Whenever you talk to an African person, you try to say their name. First of all, do they want you to know your name? Like they. So you say, "Oh, can I have your name?" And then they give you a name. It's like they reveal their name to you little by little. It's like they won't let that happen naturally in the way of relating. They do it like by, I don't know, like it's almost political. It's almost anyway. I mean, like to play games like that on the personal level. I mean, I have things to do. I have people to go to. I have things to get done. I'm trying to fix things. Like it's like I don't have time to play interpersonal politics here. I'm playing social politics because we need a nation that functions so that we lift people up. We lift people out of poverty. Obviously to do that you have to have people that on the ground are actually dispensing, but some people are actually good managers. I'm actually good at telling teachers how to teach. I actually can teach the teachers to teach the people. So, this is what you have to understand what made the British. The British were great because they allowed intelligent people into their aristocracy. That like 10% of the peers, because the peers of the realm are the aristocrats of the realm. So you are judged by a jury of your peers, but some people are not qualified to be peers. They shouldn't be peers. They are pissants. They are quislings. They are reprobates. They are idolaters. They are all these things. But in democracy, we have to respect the form of things because that is how we grow people. That is how we grow people. Is that we must inspire them to attain to the container of their incubation. We're incubating our people in our nations, are we not? Do we not want to have a nation? Do we only want to have a tribe? Do we only want to have a family? Do we not want to have a country? So some people out there don't live in a country because they're just a fucking householder. Their house is their castle, and what they do in their house must be. Well, what happens if your wife leaves your house? What happens if your wife escapes from your house? And then she goes to another man and she says, please help me, my husband is a monster. I can't tell him because if I told him, my life would be living hell. Can you rescue me, please? Please, I want a better life and I'm trapped. Or is she just, I don't know, is she ungrateful or what? Like we don't know. We don't know. Unless we change, sort of the dynamic of society, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so now even by Unwanted Contriver's own formulation of things, the problem is not a problem. Because he's saying, I believe in mutual exploitation. Okay, great. Find another woman who believes in mutual exploitation. Use that as your pickup line. He says, I don't want to date. So, I mean, I take that to mean that he wants an arranged marriage. Why does he want arranged marriage? Why can't he fish for his own woman? Unless he truly believes that women can't love, or he believes that they can only love, or some women, some people, some pairings, some couples can only be successful, that the ideal success that is a match made by committee, is a match made by methodology, that some people actually know the methodology of arranged marriages and can make them work. And I would say, please show me the evidence for that if you want to. But I mean, he's saying all these things. He says he believes in natural law. He says he believes in the authority and the dominion. I mean, he says a lot of things, and it just doesn't add up, quite frankly, in my view. Because his salt has no saltiness, at least to me. And if a woman doesn't like your salt, then fuck off. I mean, she's not for you. Um, and at what point is she supposed to say, yes, it was an okay marriage? So you just have the marriage your whole time, and supposedly it was a match made in heaven, but no one can actually say that. They're just coping. Or you can't tell if they're coping or not. So, so the best you can do is cope in life. And, and you've normalized that. I mean, this is, if you watch the J.R.R. Tolkien thing, and he uses all this poetry in his letters, Sauron makes orcs, makes machines, and I wonder if this culture in India has made people that are essentially, because they strayed from their religion and they got distracted by all these other parts of it, because people, I mean, this is why I think my Indian friend, I don't want to give even her tag, because I don't want to sort of unmask people, and I don't want to talk about people behind their backs, but this is a story that really happened to me, is that she was very generous with me. I mean, one time, she could tell I was depressed. Like, I was like thinking, maybe I should just kill myself. And she literally, out of the blue, she sent me an email or something, and she was like, I'm going to give you $15, Zhang, because you deserve it, or something. Like, I don't know how the fuck, she's telepathic or something. I don't know how she got that. I don't know, maybe I wrote something depressing on some anonymous forum, and she just and maybe she read it. I mean, who knows, mysterious things happen or something. But and she told me not to go to India, and I believed her. And I think that the reason why is because I think that, well, she did say that it would break my heart, and she did, but I mean, I think that what she meant by that was that I would think that the people are sort of beyond, are sort of just beyond, so it's like, it's a kind of generational complex. It's a kind of like, it's a cauldron of, it's an incessant, it's kind of like I mean, I don't want to talk too much about a foreign culture that I've only experienced from people who have left the country. I mean, should you really believe the people that move away from a place, I mean, they say that when you travel, you see your own country with new eyes, And I mean, I know a lot of Indian people in my country, and I believe I have the same opinion. They just latch onto some dialectical overview of things, and they think that they're a big boy. But all they think that that they should be the daddy, That I'm the daddy of this opinion, and they're very forceful, and they don't even show their basic, at least Unwanted Contriver tells you exactly what it is. He says, I believe in mutual exploitation. So, and the problem is, well, he says that, but he doesn't want to date a woman. So then why doesn't he just make an indecent proposal then? Why doesn't he just draw it up as a contract? Why doesn't he arrange his own marriage and then find some place that he can pick and choose based on what he's looking for? So he obviously needs I mean, that's my suggestion to him, is that he gets some kind of dating app or some kind of platform that suits his mutual exploitation platform. But I mean, look, he is making a decent point, because culture does have to be receptive to this, because there are basic facts, So unless a woman is incredibly rich and is going to share their youth and experience and growing together with a man at some point in time, that they can grow together so that they can sort of trust each other. And I mean, maybe you can even grow apart and grow together as you are physically apart, that you are still keeping tabs on each other, through who knows, So it's like, I mean, all of these things are immaterial. I mean, I take a much more perhaps romantic view of these things, that sort of, that, we're all connected to the Matrix, one way or another. If you watch the fourth installment of the Matrix, Neo dies. In the last episode, sorry, in the last movie, before the fourth movie, Neo dies, and then he was actually resurrected by the machines, um, because he had done enough work in the world, that there was enough in the world to essentially lead him back around, as they say. Okay. What else is my point? So that's what I was saying to him about the Fight Club thing. So I think that is the solution. But some people, they are just trying to keep their head above water. So they just are trying to cling on to everything, and then what they end up doing is they end up clinging onto salt that isn't salty, perhaps. And I say, obviously, it's excruciatingly painful to say I probably am not going to be successful, but let me continue with some hope, because people would rather, I want to hope, or I don't want to. I want to have a high hope. I don't want to have I say just have a good hope. Make your hope good enough. No, that sounds completely wrong to me. That sounds evil. It mustn't be good enough. It must actually be good, which means it must be right, which means that if you don't say it's not going to happen because the culture is broken, say it's probably not going to happen. It's probably not going to happen to me, because why? Then maybe that'll be the door to the future of changing your circumstances. You can say, why is it not going to happen for me? And then work on those. And I've always tried to do that, as best I can. But, it's been hard because I can't just work on myself, because I also have these other aspirations in life. I don't just want to be a fucking fuck machine and be a fucking breeder and breed human cattle into the world. Like, I don't care to increase the population. I must be fruitful before I multiply, or I must be able to prove that I can be fruitful as I multiply at the very least, or something like that. But how do you know that? I mean, so, you have to be fruitful is the necessary implication that must be satisfied. Multiplication is not sufficient, in my view. You can't just multiply. I mean, if you're multiplying, if you multiply without thought of fruitfulness, you are just multiplying the problem. Unless your idea is that just having more people around will help you win the war. It's just about, all it's about is, we're still in the age of, see, this is the thing, is that different continents, different places and different continents and different peoples are literally different stages of history. I mean, we are going into a different epoch in some sense, although it's the same, well, just because of sociological conditions are different, so you can talk about the differences using sociology, but the problem is that sociology doesn't have any morality attached to it. So you need both sociology and a view on true belief or religion or something like that, or having a cogent and self-consistent, self-coherent internal locus of control, and or what or you have to ground it in philosophy, essentially. So somewhere in philosophy, what you have to do is you have to realize who was right in philosophy, who is the crowning philosopher. And so if you are going to be a postmodernist, I would say you've already fucked up, because you didn't understand your own lineage, because you went past Nietzsche and you didn't understand it. And Kierkegaard and these French people, they, I mean, I knew Foucault. I personally knew Foucault. He's, some of these people, they are so outlandish, they pretend to die before they do, and then they live another 10 years, So I was friends with Foucault. Uh, he was he was like Destiny. He's like the modern, like Destiny is like the reincarnation of Foucault, but hopefully Destiny is going to get his life fixed. Because, this little kid has been a little kid man his whole life. And, he's been tormented by the fact that other people are taller than him and they've been lording it over him. It's physical shame. It's physical shame. It's brutalization. It's savagery to be treated like a piece of meat. But not only that, is that actually you do actually wish that you were stronger because there are things that you can't do or something like that. So um, and in some sense, I think that a lot of physical things doesn't matter. I mean, if you don't have the strength to do something, then maybe you need two people to do it. Maybe you need help. Um, maybe it's not for you to do. But there's one thing that does matter, which is bedroom stuff. And I mean, I've thought about bedroom stuff forever because I know that people have anxiety about it. They have insecurity about it. Like, I mean, I knew this before I even knew about sex. I knew that people had insecurity about this because I could tell that my society was sick. I could tell that adults were fucking deranged humanoids. They were insane, and I didn't know what fucking made them insane. And then my uncle told me, you think life is all good and dandy, wait until your balls drop and then you're interested in women, like then your life will go to hell. Or he didn't say it like that, but that's kind of what he was implying. And I was like, and I was like, why? And he's like, or just wait until you get a girlfriend or something like that. Or he said, like, I think he said, tell me after you get your fourth girlfriend, or tell me. And I said, well, can you explain to me why? Like, what's the problem with having a girlfriend? And he ummed and ahed about it because I was too young in his view to learn about, he was like, talk to your father or something like that, or I don't know what he said, I can't remember, but he was very kind of proper about it, not wanting to cross the line. I mean, he's just an uncle of mine, so I'm trying to get this information from an uncle. My father didn't speak to me about it, and I didn't want him to speak to me about it because I was my own father growing up. Because my father was a piece of shit. I mean, like, that's how I think about it. I mean, he was a terrible father, but he was a good provider. So, I never wanted for anything. Anything that I needed, he would provide, begrudgingly so. I mean, it's not as if they didn't try to get rid of me a few times, like if I crossed lines or, they tried to get me out, they're like, what the fuck is wrong with this kid? Like, go take him to a doctor. My father said that he doesn't agree with psychiatry and psychology, but my mother was, always just trying to, so I mean, the relationship between my parents, this is private stuff, so it's like, I'm talking about somebody else's private life, I just happen to be the product of it, the fucked up product of it, I mean, I'm completely estranged from my immediate family. I mean, I'm Harry Potter. I live in a tiny. I live like a Japanese person, which is why I also admire them because they have so much hardship just because of the lack of space. I mean, obviously that's not entirely true. I mean, that's more sort of the city Japanese. Obviously, there are still countryside houses that are a bit bigger and stuff like that. But just your actual physical environment, it speaks to you in metaphor. Like, I've also been lucky because I live in a very amazing household. Like, I live by the sea and I can see the mountain. When I look out the window, I can see the sky. I can see no, actually I can just see reeds. I see a whole lot of plants mainly. I mean, actually my window is, I never look out my bedroom window. My window is always closed, and I've got a giant blinder over it because I sleep at odd hours because I was tormented my whole life, and because I was always interacting with international people overseas, mostly Americans, but as many people. I mean, so the first people I connected with through the internet was Japanese and American people because those are the people that are attracted to RPG online games. Final Fantasy 11. So I was into Final Fantasy 11, and that's how I met my first international friends. I've got a lot of. So my first international friends were Japanese, so I'm obviously prejudiced that way. And I made a lot of Japanese friends, and it's very interesting. I mean, it's so sad as well. I mean, like, to hear about some of their lives, because I really do think that their language is what's fucking them over. Or it's the family. They it's a combination of their language, in my view, and their family structure, or at least the code, the public code, because how if you have to save anyway, let me not go into it, but just there's such beautiful individual people that in my view are, and they always, in their own way, in my view, they it was, I mean, the Japanese organization that I was a part of, they called it a link shell. So we were in a, sorry, I'm just getting emotional. So I mean, there's so much stuff that went on. These strange American people that also, so it was like, anyway, so I joined this link shell eventually. I guess I was almost in every single organization except the German organization because you can't, Germans are another thing, eh? But so people were in all these different link shells that were generally culturally bound, and it was interesting because like I never lusted after power. I was never trying to be in the big club. I was trying to find the cool boys, and so like I my favorite link shell was, oh my word, I can't even remember the name. I mean, I was in so many. I mean, uh I was in a prince. I mean, fuck. He's the what is he? I think I think he's like the president of the Scottish Bank or something. I can't remember. He's a high powered guy now, but he was a prince in oh my word. Anyway, but he barbecue link shell, but I really loved my Japanese. I mean, I always wanted to be a part of them, and I was always friends with people from that link shell because they were friendly to me. I would ask them questions. I would try to ask Japanese people questions, and they would never respond to me, and they all thought that I was rude, or maybe they just didn't speak English. And I would always examine them to see what they were wearing because you could examine people to see like what gear that they were wearing. And I didn't know, and eventually people would tell me like don't do that. Like someone told me like don't examine people, and I was like, but I want to see. Like I want to see like because I was like lower level, so I want to see what I should be trying to, like I was trying to theory craft. And I didn't understand, and they said no, you must ask first. Because obviously, like it's embarrassing for a Japanese person if someone sees what you're wearing and then they think that you're making a mistake or that you're stupid, and then like they haven't been able to give you a disclaimer as to what it is that they're doing, or like, oh, you're like, no, I don't want you to see, because maybe if you ask them they would say no, please don't look yet, it's because I'm still doing this, or like no, maybe you can do it maybe they would give you a condition, or they would like give you a prompting. I mean, I don't exactly know. Or they would say something to save face. So maybe they would just say something that would allow them to save face before you have a look at it. Whereas, like, I never judged anyone. I was just examining the situation, And because also that's how you learn. Because, like, first of all, you see something that somebody else has, and then you're like, okay, I want to have that. And then you have to ask somebody else at some point how you get it, or where it comes from first. Like, where does that come from? And then how do you get it? And those are like three completely independent questions. And, that's how I fact find. And then I found out, okay, I need to join, at some point, I need to join a link shell that has like this many people in it, because like that is how because when we started playing the game, I joined with the American cohort essentially. And the Japanese people on the server, it was Odin server, were a bit pissed off because they were like, we played this game. No one told us that we would be playing this online game with English speaking people on the same server as us. So they felt violated already that we were even there. We were immigrants. We were literally American immigrants, and also maybe some European immigrants. So we were the first wave of immigrants to this Japanese server. And I didn't realize that. I only learned that much, much, much later, that these people actually they felt slightly betrayed, because in Japan it's different. In Japan, when you set out guidelines for something, they are set in stone. It's like if you present a platform to someone with a certain expectation, you have to conserve that expectation. And Final Fantasy has a connotation to Japanese people because they've been playing Final Fantasy games forever. That's how it works. So people thought that they were reliving their own experience of Final Fantasy. They were playing a new version of the same kind of game. They were playing the next iteration of Final Fantasy. So they just finished playing Final Fantasy X. Now this is Final Fantasy XI. It's come out. Even though Final Fantasy XI was starting to be developed after Final Fantasy VIII, we were already starting to develop Final Fantasy XI, and we realized that we couldn't until we understood more data coming from EverQuest. So like I outlined the game design of EverQuest in consultation, and because I didn't even want to, because I don't fuck with things when you don't even know the first thing about them. So, and some inventive, creative Japanese person like already had some ideas of his own, and I said, okay, you tell me, like, how is it going to be like this? And we had long discussions and questions, and based on that, he came up with a thesis, and then he brought it back to me, and then I refined it. But it was his thesis, so it was really actually, essentially, I mean, he invented EverQuest. And then after EverQuest, I even made some predictions, and I said, okay, I'm going to ask you some questions, and then please answer them. And I said, your game's going to fall apart in these ways, and I can't explain it, because we usually go until I can't explain. We go until we can't explain, and then I make a kind of prediction. I make a kind of metaphorical thing which I don't even fully understand yet. And then when it actually happens in the experiment, then it comes back to me, and I say, okay, now we actually know what this means in real terms. We know the factors involved, or we know a set of examples of the same thing. But I mean, this is all sociology, so it's fucking useless. And so when then that's the ingredient. Now I go to make Final Fantasy XI, and what do? I say, okay, well, we have to start around something. We need, so let's make the most generic jargon possible. We need classes. They're different classes. Now the question is, should you? And then he said, no, wait. Class is not the most generic. They're also jobs. We could have a job system where you can have one character and you have different jobs. And I said, no, we'll call it a class system, but it'll be a job system that you can change your class like you change your job. And essentially it has that woven into it. You see, so I was already setting up the future in Final Fantasy XI. It was already a model of integration, essentially. And and that's how I learned about things so I was just like everybody else, but I believe I was the most famous person on I mean, I was infamous. I was both famous and infamous. Everyone had two stories about me. I mean, I was the wizard. I was the black magic wizard. But I was also a dragoon. But no one wanted to make me a special dragoon because black mage could always do these other things, which, I mean, I could really do magical things. I mean, like, I was the key to unlocking Dynamis, essentially, for the English-speaking people. The Japanese people were so clever they worked out how to do Dynamis, or maybe they were cheating, who knows. You can't really get information that way. And then it took me a long time, and I finally got into, what's it called? Oh my word. I still can't, they were a name in full capitals, and the name was called Hot Spur, no, Red, it was called Red something. Red, oh my word. Anyway, this organization, I always wanted to be in it because some guy in it called Coffee was always friendly to me. He was the guy who actually gave me lots of charity when I was new. He actually farmed it, like, by himself. He was a warrior. Just by himself, I was amazed that he was able to solo like that. Like, because was like, I'm going to try and make a character that can solo content, like Coffee can, because I don't know how he did it. Like, he almost died. Like, he would have to run out, because if you died in Final Fantasy 11, you were screwed. So like, what I would do is I leveled up my white mage just for him, so that I could raise him if he died. And so I would just watch him fight the game for me, and then I would heal him a little bit if I knew that if I could heal him. Because you see, if you heal someone and then they die, then the monster will kill you. So I can only heal him if I know for a fact that by me healing him, he will definitely win. So I have to understand all the monsters in the area, because there are people prowling around. They're monsters that, there are all these different types of monsters. You get like random things, and like, it's like a random generator, and so, and if he did die, if he did die and I let him die, then I could raise him up, and then he would fight for me. So he was my champion, and he went and he got all these things for me, and so I got, like, so with a little bit of outside Japanese help, I got a leg up into the Final Fantasy 11 community of status, because when you've got all these American English speaking people on your server, like, for them it's all about what you got. It's all about how rich you look. It's all about sort of how impressive you are. And I always try to impress them with good advice, because I actually knew things about the game that they didn't, because I well, maybe not. I mean, they read things, but I didn't read things. I only focused on I never read an outside guide for Final Fantasy 11, I believe. I never. No, wait. No, there were guides for like where to go to get your artifact armor and stuff like that. But there were never any guides on like the hyper notorious monsters, which is the really important information, because that's where all the good gear comes from. At least when the top tier of the game went up to level 75. Like, level 75 in Final Fantasy 11 was essentially the good old days, essentially. And if you wanted a relic weapon, it was literally, if you had a relic weapon in Final Fantasy 11, it was literally like having Excalibur. Because to get a relic weapon in Final Fantasy, you literally had to have your friends and other people work together for you for 3 years, maybe 3 to 4 years, depending on the size of the group. You'd have to almost have half the server working for you for a year. No, maybe not half. I mean, it depends what the population is, but you'd need a lot of people to scramble to get you a relic weapon, or a mythic weapon or something like that. I never got. I mean, I always had dreams, but but they kept on changing what they did, so it messed up my dream, because, like, I wanted the Dragoon Lance, because what the Dragoon Lance does, it does a lot of cool things. But the problem is that, like, like, so few people had them, you never knew what they even did. And I was like, is it just for show? Like, is it even fucking good? Like, how good is it? Because, like, there were other weapons which were, like, at some points in the game, because they changed the game mechanics a bit, they would literally change things. Like, but that was, they only really changed it in the early days. They were still refining the game, and so you got this thing called TP, which is kind of like tactical. They're called tactical points. So whenever you do an auto attack, you would get some tactical points if you're a melee character, and if you got full TP, then you could do a limit break. But if you were a two-handed weapon and your limit break was a multi-hit limit break, each hit in the multi-hits would be the same as an auto attack. So if you had a high enough delay weapon, because the amount of TP that you got is relative to the delay on the weapon. So if you got an insanely high delay weapon, you could just chain limit break after limit break after limit break after limit break. And I was watching the Japanese people do this, and I was like, oh my god, that's broken. Like, I want to fucking do that. Like, that's insane. Like, that's amazing. And this one guy, he got like a relic weapon, like not the top tier relic weapon, I mean the starter relic weapon, because everyone can get a starter relic weapon. They don't mean anything. They do 1 damage, but they have 999 delay. And this one guy, he's a monk, right? And he got this monk 999 delay weapon, and somehow because there's something about the monk mechanic that they scale damage based on their base stats. And so this monk was wearing a lot of gear that gave him a lot of strength and stuff, which gives you, I think, life as well. I can't even, so long ago. And he was just chaining Ashran fists or whatever. He was just going Ashran fist, Ashran fist, Ashran fist, and he was doing so much damage. It was insane. So it was like, that was better than Dragoon, you know? So he was like showing me that like my idea that I wanted to do for Dragoon, like he was doing it better. But, you know, obviously you want the dream, you want to aim for something. And you know, the relic weapon is rare. Like no one has the relic weapon. So it's like, it was always just something that kept the community, you know, like it was like, you know, that it would be that something that like the community gave you as a gift. But then you also had the thing is that you don't just want to take a gift for a community, from a community. You want to give the community something back in return. It mustn't just be a status symbol. So what you should do, right, is you should give it to the tank, to the paladin, because that'll make it easier for the healers. Because in my view, we had problems with healing. I mean, we had serious problems with healing. I mean, like, because if a healer breaks concentration and you've been playing for 2 hours and he starts falling asleep or something like that, or he wants to take a bathroom break, I mean, that was the thing that I guess I never had issues with like bathroom breaks because I was a black mage, I guess. So I could just like quickly go take a whiz while I was resting, because like you have to rest to regain your mana, and red mages can cast refresh on you, which makes your mana regenerate. And if you're kind of clever, you can always have mana. Um, so there are ways around things, especially when they brought out more support characters like bards. So as soon as you got bards, and also later on they even got corsairs and stuff like that. But that was, I think that was post 75. But so there are all these support characters, and you know, at some point you get a kind of combinatorial explosion, and then you have to sort of curb things. But anyway, they kind of changed limit breaking. They changed the mechanics of limit breaking. Anyway, I'm talking about so much. So you know, my dream sort of just became just making a good character and being part of a good team and stuff like that. And then I ended up sort of in barbecue, and I was getting barbecued probably because the leader, when he was around, it was great because it only worked when he was the leader and he was actually attending to leadership. And then when he had to go work in real life and get like a proper job and stuff like that, and he didn't have so much free time, he had to leave it in somebody's care, and he left it in the care of a Canadian, and he gave certain or he didn't give restrictions. He just said so he said, okay, you can administer it or something like that. But he gave a certain, and so I became sort of the advisor to him because, you know, the group was disintegrating, the group was degenerating. And I said, no, the problem is that this place needs rules. We need to have rules to systematize things. And then, you know, I was working on a system, and then other people were, sorry, I'm getting this completely confused. This is actually this is after Limit Break. So there was actually a link shell called Limit Break, which was mostly European and American and Asian. The leader of Limit Break was Masago, who was Chinese, or ethnically I don't know if he was an American Chinese or something like that. Yeah, obviously he was. I don't know where exactly he lived. I can't remember. And then there was Black Cat as well, and his brother. Or I think Black Cat and Masago were brothers. I can't remember. So Black Cat was a bit messed up because I think somebody else was playing his account half the time, because he had like the most points in Limit Break, and he would not. I think he had a little brother. I think his little brother was trying to help him get points in the link shell. So it was terrible because he would go to events, but he would say like, no, 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 I can't tank, or he was saying, I'm not going to tank, or something like that. So it was terrible, like, because he was just basically he was sculpting the system, as they say. Um, anyway, so I mean, this is how I understand politics. I understand politics because I lived through an emulation of it. I played, you game it out, you know. But I gamed it out on the level of Naruto. That's how I didn't game it out on the level of sociology. I gamed it out on the level of Naruto. And then what's the other thing? Is that what is the other thing? Going back to one of my earlier points, which I want to return to now, rather than talk about my own experience. But so like I was kicked out of Limit Break by Jeremiah, who didn't like me. So I was kicked out not for breaking the rules. I mean, there are many people that were kicked out of Limit Break for breaking the rules, but I incensed Jeremiah because how he was doing the auction. They invented a point auction house, which was completely stupid. I developed a whole alternative model. I was like, you should do this instead. And it's like, no. Jeremiah is trying to like work out how to fix the point system. Jeremiah is in control of concocting the point system. And I'm like, Jeremiah is a fucking idiot. Like, you can't do what he's trying to do. Is he trying to farm us for information? Like, because Jeremiah had one of the most points in the link shell. And all the tanks are greedy as fuck because the tank gear in the game is the rarest gear in the game. And Jeremiah wants Defending Ring for himself. That's Final Fantasy XI is about tanks having the highest points in the game so that they can get Defending Ring so that they can feel like they have a big dick. Like, that's basically it. It's all about Defending Ring in Final Fantasy XI is the one ring in the Lord of the Rings, basically. It is the rarest item in the game. That is why my Japanese link shell that I love always camped King Behemoth. Always. Even if there was the smallest chance that King Behemoth could spawn, we camped it. Other link shells wouldn't even try. They would only, like, it suddenly became known or thought that we don't know what's happening on the server side of things, and there's a reset that happens that the maintenance happens infrequently, and that there's only ever one King Behemoth. And so you have to wait for that infrequent thing to happen, and then you can get another hyper notorious monster spawn, because it was really all over the fucking place. Sometimes King Behemoth was the most volatile hyper notorious monster there was, because it costs Meteor. So like you have to run away from it. It doesn't matter. Like all the other hyper notorious monsters, you can just tank it to the face, and you can fuck with it, and you can kill it. And you just need to have the healing to cover the tank, and you need to have other people at a certain distance, because it creates these huge area damage. So basically what you have to do is, if you're a black mage, you have to run up to it, you have to do a lot of damage, and then you have to run far away, and then you start resting, or something like that. Unless we actually worked out eventually what the optimum strategy was, is that you need a kite tank, because if your tank is kiting, then you'll never die to Meteor, because that's the problem, is that if you try to face it, if you don't run from Behemoth, he's going to kill someone. Someone has to run from Behemoth. Someone has to be the kiter, the tank kiter, and then someone has to be the nuker. So that's we used magic to kill Behemoth. So you can't really use melee, because you're running off. You can only melee him from the back while he's casting Meteor. So he better be casting Meteor on someone far away that's going to run out of his range. So you can actually melee him. I stand corrected. You just have to wait for him to cast Meteor, which he does a lot of the time, but not so often or whatever. But Black Mage is like the best DPS. The problem is that like Black Mage is needs protection. You need to be able to cast Stone Skin on yourself, because like for example, if you're fighting Fenrir or Nidhogg, like you have to worry, because like I do so much damage. Like one time I even helped another Link Shell kill something. I helped them because they were a starting Link Shell, and maybe it was a bit promiscuous of me, but I was there as a scout, because what the big link shells would do is they would send, if they weren't, you would choose which one to camp. You would choose, because sometimes the hyper notorious monsters would spawn at the same time. their windows would spawn at the same time. So depending on the size of your link shell, you would divide up and choose what to camp and what not to camp based on who's online. Now, the Japanese link shell that I loved actually had a civilized way to do this. In fact, everything about it was civilized. You didn't have a point system that went up into ad infinitum. It had a max out, and you could use it only when you had 100 points. So basically, if you wanted an item, it had to be on your list. You could only have like 2 items on your list, although the list was a bit of a problem. We actually worked out at some point that the system was kind of breaking down, and the reason why it was breaking down is because the Americans were fucking it over, because they're kind of they broke the culture of the link shell. It's all the tanks. That's what it is. The tanks are just so greedy for their gear, because their gear, I don't know, I guess they feel that they're the center of the show because they're the one that the monster is actually facing, and everybody else is just some kind of DPS or support, and they're the center of the universe, or they're the point of contact. Anyway, the long and the short of it is that I worked out that the best relic weapon to get is a shield, is Aegis, because the shield actually makes a fucking huge difference to tanking. Like, if a paladin had Aegis had like the same block rate as a buckler, but it blocked the same amount of damage as like the heaviest shield. So it was like you would just block 90% of everything, depending on the level of the monster. But I think it actually had a decent block rate even on like the highest level monsters. So in terms of like keeping the tank alive, it was actually the most important thing. But you see, the problem with Excalibur is that even if you wanted to use Excalibur and you wanted to use Knights of the Round, it healed you, but it did shit damage and it gave you bad hate. I don't think it did, like, there was this other weapon skill that you had to do, I think, to sorry, they're called weapon skills, not limit breaks. So I'm using Final Fantasy VII terminology. I got it all completely mixed up. Yeah, they're not limit breaks, they're weapon skills. So that puts a whole new spin on that whole story. Anyway, my voice is getting a bit hoarse. What's the point? What is the point? So here I am in all these different groups with all these different groups of people. Some of them are much more cohesive. Obviously, when the leader rules by sentiment and decree and by, trust, obviously that's very peaceful. But you also want a system in which that people know that they're getting a fair deal and they're not getting, a raw shake, So, I was thinking in general, that like, what is the value of a secret, Because a secret could also be like something that you need to learn in your own time, because otherwise you're going to overcompensate and act out, and maybe you don't know what that is. Is that culture? Is that what you've normalized based on some practice or based on some tradition? And the tradition, the core of the tradition in the Gita at least, is that the first duty is unwanted population, is do not create unwanted population. But what happens if you create population that they don't even know if they're unwanted or not? Because I believe that I was unwanted population. I mean, I've known that my whole life growing up. I mean, explicitly. I mean, I've heard through the grapevine, or I know myself, or maybe I imagined it because I'm schizophrenic, but it was very clear to me that from all the shouting that I heard inside my mother's womb, and I think heard my father say the words, go get an abortion, in a deep voice, and my mother said nothing because my mother asked my grandmother what to do, and she was essentially implicitly asking if she would grant permission for her to get an abortion. And then in my view, I had a spiritual communication with my grandmother, and I made certain promises to her to guarantee my life. So I basically had to make a deal, had to strike a deal with my grandmother to essentially put pressure on my mother to fuck up my mother's life, because my mother was therefore not happy, putting up with a man that was a piece of shit. So I had to sort of con my own family into existing. Uh, by the way, I mean, I have memories of this. I actually have memories of entering into the body at about 4 months' time, as I was told that by spirits. Like, no, don't want to enter into the body before. And I said, but why? And they said, no, let the angels do the work or something like that. And I was like, oh, but can't I go? Can't I help the angels? Can't it be part of it? And they said, oh, you can try to go in early or something like that, but it's not advisable or something. Anyway, and then what was really bad is that I don't know what it was. Maybe it was me, maybe it was my father or something like that. My mother drank something. I think she drank some sort of a little bit of drain fluid, and I could actually. This was sometime after 4 months, and I got a huge buzz. I got like a complete, like my mind just kind of opened or something. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what it was. Like, I mean, I'm projecting that when I say drain fluid. I'm projecting that. I don't know what she drank. Maybe some secret home. Maybe this is all a conspiracy. Maybe they all did this on purpose. Maybe she's a Bene Gesserit and she drank the water of life, which is some herbal concoction. Who knows? Maybe it was a homeopathy thing. Who knows? Who knows? I mean, my grandmother was Catholic, so I don't. And my mother, I don't know. I've always thought of my mother as sort of being um, a Muslim. Actually, I mean that's how I. Anyway, never mind. But which, in some sense, I think is connected with Catholicism in a secret way. But anyway, um, anyway, what is my point? My point is that I mean I'm that's pure speculation, like a scientist. I mean I'm that's I don't even know if I want to resolve these questions. All I know is how it felt when it was happening to me. And then I said to I was because I was talking to my ancestors while I was in the womb, these other voices, these other spirits or whatever, and they said, oh, your mother is drinking something that she shouldn't drink, and it's hurting you. And then I said, well, that's not nice. Like, am I like because I didn't like the feeling, and so I asked her. I said, sorry, I asked. I asked this voice or whatever. Maybe the voice was just in my blood. And I said, well, this is terrible now. Now now it's ruined. Like now because I'm at an early stage. I'm still growing. Now I'm going to be stunted or broken or something, and then he kind of I can't remember. It was a bit complicated, and he kind of consoled me, and then he said, no, but the body can repair itself, and then so I said, okay, well, can you tell me when it's finished? Can you tell me now when it will be finished repairing? And then he said, I don't know, or like it depends on what you do and things like that. And so then I said something like, well, can we make it not depend and like, or no, and anyway, the answer is no. We couldn't come up with a fixing it. So I just said, okay, can you please tell me when it's actually finished repairing? I said, is it likely to be repaired? Is it likely to be repaired at what age or something? Like can you give me a probability? And so it said that was how it was responding to me. And it said like yeah, like maybe around it can be it really depends, like he said, it depends on the choices and things that I make or whatever. And but I said, aren't I likely to be anyway? So I just said, okay, well then how about you just tell me how close I am. No, I didn't say that. I said, okay, when it's, because he said, no, I can't speak to you. I shouldn't be talking to you once you start your life and you start making choices. I shouldn't be talking to you anymore because otherwise you can't grow if you're always relating to me. So it was saying how it's going to stand back behind the veil, essentially. And then I said, okay, well, can you please just tell me when this is finished repairing? And then he was trying to tell me because he was trying to console me but not lie to me, and he was basically trying to say it's not going to be repaired, like it's not going to be the same. Like what, you can't get what you lost. There's no such thing. Like you can't undo history. Like was kind of the point. And maybe that was my grandfather talking to me. Maybe that was the spirit of my grandfather in his dream talking to me. And maybe that's what my ancestors are. They're my living ancestors that talk to me in my dreams. That's how we are connected, within our lineages, within our living blood. Anyway, or maybe it's just your grandparents, everyone who's in the class of your grandparents, or something like that, or great grandparents. I mean, who has how many great grandparents? And I was told by somebody else a long, long, long time in the future that, like, oh, they talk to spirits or something like that, and that what she does for people is she gives people an angel, an archangel prediction or something like that, and she writes out their guardian spirits, or they. I think she was talking about ancestors, and then she was saying everyone has 9 names at the most. Everyone has some number of names. So that's what she does, is she gives people their spiritual name, and she told me my spiritual name, and that it had 9. I can't remember. I'm getting it mixed up. I don't understand it exactly, but it was someone who believes in the ashes of God, or something like the ashes of the will of God. That she said my spiritual name is he who believes in the ashes of the will of God, or something like that. And I said, yeah, okay, I guess that sounds true to me, because I don't. I want. So this is the thing, is that sort of the consequences. And this goes back into this issue of that you don't know what your dharma is until you do, I guess, and you don't know what karma your dharma makes you hold while you don't know who that karma is for, as you're maybe not even holding it from the person that you took it from, but it's karma that you're holding for other people, and maybe that karma is the imprisoned, the blood of the saints that have been locked into the city of Babel, Babylon, Babylon the Great, they say, because maybe Babylon the Great is the leading civilizations of the world and how they exist, and that there's good inside of them. There's good blood inside of it, inside of the mortar, but it's locked into the technology, it's locked into the sociology, and because people have mixed themselves with machines. I mean, look at me. I'm poetically synthesizing this on the fly. I mean, this is just off the top of my head. You have to take this with a pinch of salt, because at the end of the day, we're just going to get a metaphor out of this, and a metaphor. What is a metaphor for? You know. So anyway, going back to another thing is that, and in some sense, I do think that this is all around the same thing. Is that I do think that women have gotten over their shame. I don't think women have. I don't think we have an equality problem. I don't think we have a mother problem. I think we have a father problem. I don't think, uh, and other cultures have less of this problem, but they also give up a lot to not have that problem. So when you look at people who are essentially further back in cultural space and time due to their sociological conditioning, they haven't been exposed to things, but also their culture and their language hasn't ripened in connection with these things, you know. So I wonder how that's coming along. I wonder if the African linguists can tell me, you know, like how has African languages evolved. But I do think that we should really not go in the Indian model, because if you have densely populated people that speak different languages, you're going to turn into India, and you're going to normalize dehumanization of people. And I don't want to turn into India, because I mean, just on the face of it, on the top of off the top of my head, I've been told that, like, India, the poverty in India is not something that I would be able to tolerate. So I'm just going to take that on face value, and I'm going to stop talking about India. Maybe I should talk about my own backyard. But anyway, I mean, this conclusion is basically something that I haven't spoken this conclusion before, but this is my thinking on the matter. You know, that we should really try. I mean, this is what King. I don't know. Do they have a king at the moment? King Goodwill. Uh, sorry. The king of Sutu. Um, I wonder. You know, who is the. You know, you can't have different royal houses. You know, you have to have one royal house, and Krolls maybe, or something. But you know, we need to unify the Africans. You know, so maybe all the white people need to pick up some new language, some African language, and then treat ourselves like a tribe and come up with our own tribal structure, so that we can do diplomacy with the other ones, so that we can actually broker peace. Because maybe that's the problem, is that, you know, maybe that's why there's war in this country, on the level of being slowly genocided. You know, we're being slow Cosby'd right now. You know, we've got the nuclear power station is about to go nuclear. You know, all these meltdown threats that are happening because we're not in charge of our own Western Cape nuclear power station, and we're hiring the wrong people. You know, we obviously need to, for matters of life and death reasons, the Western Cape needs to take possession of Kuburg, and we need to sort of we need to create our own managerial team, and we obviously need to be disconnected from the black economic empowerment, you know, imposition, which is, you know, going to make us radioactive if we don't, you know, we're going to kill ourselves if we don't increase the standard. And it's also my view that we need to go completely nuclear. Renewable energy generators, look, I don't know all the facts, but every time they've tried renewable energy, it's increased the cost of electricity, and we're Africa. We can't afford that. Western Cape already is picking up the slack of the rest of South Africa. So many people migrate here over and over and over again. So what we really need to do is we need to get our act together and not invest in the worst energy ever. We need to actually understand, if we cannot beat Eskom's price of electricity in the long term, obviously with input costs and setup costs, it's gonna increase the cost of electricity. But the idea that we're going to spend extra money on more expensive electricity than the Eskom coal base is utterly atrocious. Nuclear power is cheaper. The only way that you can say that it's not cheaper is if you say, well, it's not insured. Well, fuck you. We don't have to insure nuclear power, because we do something else instead. We have to guarantee that nothing bad happens, and we just have to manage it properly by responsible people. That's the difference between the Western Cape and the rest of the country. We can actually handle nuclear power. So let's stick it to them. Let's actually fucking, you know, let's use the Western Cape as a flagship for what the country could be if it was ruled by the DA. And actually say, we're not going to do this bullshit. We're not going to kowtow to the ignorance of the masses and all this Lani yuppie bullshit ideology that, oh, renewable is the future and all this other utter crap. Yeah, how about when you can actually make renewable work at a cheaper price than coal, we'll talk to you. But right now, the Indians are working on thorium power. That means that if we build all of our nuclear power stations as soon as possible, maybe 5 to 10 years, that they'll, if we run, what is the fastest that the DA government can build a new nuclear power station on the ground safely and effectively? That is the test of managerial excellence and skill. So you do that. You say, oh, people say that it takes 10 years to get these things through. Well, how good is the Western Cape provincial administrative function? Can we do it through the courts? If we really want to do it fast, what we should do is we should just hire the French, because the French are experts at setting up nuclear power. Or maybe the Germans, all the German engineers that are now out of work because they closed down all the nuclear in Germany. Let's get the German engineers maybe rather than the French, or let's get a combination of both. Let's get them working together, designing the best up-to-date nuclear thing. No. We don't have time for that. It must already be designed. It must already be ready to go. Oh wait, don't we have a local pebble bed reactor? How many pebble bed reactors are built in China, and how many do we have? So we actually designed pebble bed nuclear reactors. China's using them. We're not. I mean, why? Because nuclear's got a bad name. Why don't we just use the pebble bed reactors? I mean, that's a very modern design. It just needs maintenance. It needs people that actually look after the thing. I mean, we already own the intellectual property. Why don't we deploy it in our own back? It's good enough for China. It's not good enough for us. I mean, are you saying that we, I mean, maybe we should learn from the Chinese experience and learn how easy it was for them to install them, as it were, or produce them, and see if we shouldn't maybe tweak the design a little bit in terms of just making it easier to produce. But obviously, only qualified engineers can do that and such. So we need people that really understand what they're talking about. But anyway, either way, we need to go with a design that already exists, and we need to be doing this yesterday, and we need to go nuclear. It's very obvious that nuclear is the solution. Until renewables are more energy dense, if we go for wind power and solar, we are going to destroy the fauna and flora of the Western Cape. That's like the best thing that we have for our tourism. We're going to blight the land. Like, if you watch, what was that movie called? Total Recall. If you watch Total Recall, see what a dystopia it is. You just see all these wind farms and all these solar panels and all these mirrors covering the land. It's desolate. It's the abomination of desolation. It's sterile. I mean, if you look now, first of all, I just want to say I don't know what I'm talking about in the particular, because obviously we're in Africa. We have better sunlight maybe than Europe does. So maybe we have to take that into account. And let's just think about it for a second. Solar is still only like 20 to 40% energy efficient, taking it from the sun, which is itself not even a very dense. So you still are going to need a fuck ton of. Do you know how expensive it is to produce solar panels? No, thank you. Windmills will kill birds. So we're going to slaughter all the birds, and we're going to also dissipate the weather of the world. Because people don't know what the long-term effects on the weather are with wind power. So, to save the environment, we're stopping the wind in the world from blowing. And we don't even understand how the weather system works. I mean, people are fucked up about climate change, and they're fucked up about CO2 emissions, which in my view, in my learned opinion, because I have learnt from the best, I have learnt from the polymath who invented the modeling of all this shit. Roger Penrose. I was about to say Roger Scruton, a bit of a slip, who has passed on now, sadly. But Roger Penrose designed the math, designed the technology that allows these people to model climate. And he says that they're talking shit, that they don't know what they're doing, or if they think that they know what they're doing, well, they probably are just grifting, because that is how you make money in science right now, is you write a climate model and you write something explosive for the media to latch onto, and then you get your grant money. Like that's how it's just it so right now science is just a drain on the entire public economy, because they're just they're exploiting it, so the whole thing is just empty. Okay, we need to go nuclear yesterday. That's the answer to the question, and we need to do it proudly. Just look at the difference between France and Germany. France is like full nuclear. Now look, I'll admit one thing. Maybe wind is different, because maybe we live in such a geographical location that there is very, very high wind, and if we put a windmill there, and maybe there are no birds there, only if there are no birds, if there are never any birds going through that very high wind, we have to be careful, because maybe if we do that, if we put a windmill there and there are no birds there, then maybe a dragon will come and remove it, because nature doesn't like people that fuck with it. But windmills also are not that renewable. People don't know what to do with all of the leftover shit. You have to burn it or something. It's not very renewable. Whereas thorium will be able to take all of the nuclear spent fuel, which has already been kept in separate sealed. So we've already got we're storing up thorium fuel. So we either need thorium molten salt reactors from India right away, and then we can use our own spent fuel from Coburg to power it all. That'll be pretty cool. Or we need to go pebble bed. And we need to have a mixture of pebble bed and thorium. So obviously the Western Cape will be the trailblazer. We'll go first. So we'll either go pebble bed, and then we'll collect all the spent fuel ready to be put into so we'll try to speak to the Indians, like, in terms of how you're going to incorporate spent fuel into the fuel cycle. Like, can you please design us one that is based on spent fuel, so that the Western Cape will be where we'll take the riskier technology that requires high maintenance and high oversight, and then we'll give you the waste, and you'll process the waste in thorium, which you'll build in the future when the Indians are finally building it, and then that's how we'll get off coal, because obviously I mean, the more coal we put into the air, it just means that we need to lock more coal into the carbon cycle. Sorry, we just need to lock more carbon into the carbon cycle, which is easy. We just need to make the Earth more green. We need to replenish the Earth. We need to turn the Sahara Desert into a forest. I mean, it's not that hard to do. I mean, you do the same thing that you do with mine reclamation. So I mean, there are lots of arid places in America. In South Africa, which we know how to repair now. With the we need to start thinking like horticulturalists, but we also need ways to control the climate. But I actually have I'm working with a friend. We actually have, on paper, we have a design that can literally look. I mean, we're toying with some things, but on paper we haven't done the math. But conceptually, it should be able to control the world's climate, but it would be decentralized, and so the only way to make it work would be, it's kind of like everyone has air conditioners in their own house, but the air conditioners are heat pumps instead. And then as long as that, I mean, this already exists, but right now they run on electricity, whereas I'm creating essentially, with a friend, a different concept that's similar, but it's kind of different. And it runs off different properties. Anyway, this is his. Well, he wants to invent this with me, so I can't sort of talk about it too openly. You see, so I mean, this is the problem with secrets and things like that. Sort of, are we depriving the world, or are we the ones that are working at breakneck speed to try to fix things? Just need a bit of seed money, and we can buy the materials and start doing it, or maybe somebody else will intercept what we're trying to do. I mean, one time I bought from America, I bought tantalum and tungsten. I bought tantalum because it's rare from America, and they fucked me completely. They took like 4 months to send it, and then after like 5 months, they said no, we're keeping it. And I think what they do is that they don't send it to you. What they do is they retain it, they hold it, they send it as late as possible. And if the price of the metal changes in the interim, they basically cancel the sale and then they sell it to somebody else at the higher price. It's like a form of retrospective gouging, and they do that because if you're ordering from South Africa, they don't care about you. I mean, that's also how the fuck I got fucked by a French woman like that, by a woman who bought a I can't remember what it's called, like it has a weird name. It's called like an Ambrose, or it's called an ambule or something. Like there was this thing that was floating in the ocean. I was with a whole bunch of fishermen. This thing floating in the ocean, it was floating towards us. I said, "What's that thing? What's that thing?" And he says, "Don't tell anyone. Just look away. Just look away." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "I'll tell you afterwards. I'll tell you later." And then later on, we're fishing, and then it comes right up to the boat, and I pick it up, and I said, "Oh, like," and then I say, "Oh, it's right here now." And then I picked it up and I showed it, and I said, "What is this?" Like, no, wait, I didn't pick it up. I asked him. I said, "What is that? The thing?" I said, like, no, wait, because it came up to the boat and I said, "Can I touch it? Like, is it safe? Like, is it a creature, or like, is it poisonous?" And he said, "Yeah, it's not going to hurt you." And so, like, I don't know, I was a little bit freaked out by it because I had no idea what it was. So I actually picked it up and I said, "Okay, what the fuck is this?" And I held it in my hand. "Can someone tell me what this is?" You know? And it was this white thing, and it was just floating there in the ocean. He said, "It comes from a whale's blowhole," or something like that. And it's used to make perfume. And then someone told me, and I said, "Oh, okay, like, oh, so people make perfume with it. So what is it worth?" And they said, "Oh, it's worth actually a lot of money, like to the right person or something like that." So I said, "Oh, so we can sell it and make money." And they're like, they're a bit confused or something like that, because the thing is that it is worth a lot, but you have to be able to sell it, and you have to take it to market. And so I said, well, who buys them? And they were like, "We don't know," or something like that. Or there's a French lady, but we sent her one, and then she just stole it. Basically, she never sent us any money. Like, she said that so they had already fucked over someone in the country. So okay, so I said, "Well, why didn't you do something about it?" And they're like, "We don't know what to do. We don't know what the law is." So I went and I found a notary, and I tried to understand the law. I tried to understand these things, and I worked out what is the process. And then so the notary designed the process for me, and I understood it, and I understood it from the top down. And so then I started getting the ball rolling. So I said, "Okay, so I'm going to set a trap now. I'm going to be a bit of an undercover police officer, but I also want the money for myself." So this is not entrapment. This is not entrapment. I mean, it is also entrapment, but I mean, if she just sends me the money, I said, "I'll just give you because you told me what it is. I didn't even know what it was. You told me this woman's address. So I will do all the work, but you must help me." And I said, "I will give you the money." So basically, I'll sell it to her. If she gives me the money, I'll give it all to you, because it was all because of you. And if I don't get the money, then I will go and find out what the fuck is wrong with these people. Like, and because and I'll sort it out. Like, I'll get justice for you. Essentially, that's what I said. I said, "I'll bring you justice. Either way, you're going to get justice or you're going to get money, like one or the other." And I said, and he needed some assurance. I don't know if I extracted it from him. I said, "No, no, no, look, I've been leading you along here. I've been saying a lot of things to you. I mean, do you not want this? You don't think that you deserve it, or what? Like, or do you have your own? Is this a religious belief? You tell me, are you on board with this or not?" And he said, "I have to ask my priest." And I said, "Oh, okay, I'm sorry." And I was a little bit incensed. I think I was incensed first. I was like, "Why?" But this is common sense. This is like obvious, like it's just, of course, like why wouldn't? How could he not say no? Or how could he not say yes? Go ahead. And then so So I said, okay, go ask your priest, and then come back to me. And then it's strange. And then I think the priest said maybe, or the priest said no. You see, he said, oh, the priest said to me maybe, and then he said no. And I said, what? And then I said, that's weird. Like, so he just makes it up as he goes along or something. Like, why does he? Anyway, and he said, I don't know, or something like that. So I don't know. But and I said, okay, no, maybe it's my fault because, like, I'm your priest now. I've just taken you from him, I guess. Maybe that's why he said maybe, and then he said no, because like I'm adulterating your teaching now because I just taught you something and it didn't come from your priest. So now you have to merge these things together. And I don't know if this guy is if he's trying to elbow me out of the way, you know. So now it's priest versus priests, or I'm the priest on the outside and he's the priest on the inside of the fold, you know? So it's like, you know, this is the problem of trust and insularity and ideology and groups and all these sorts of things, right? And all this came because I wanted to sook with a French woman who, in my view, had stolen something. But maybe she didn't steal something. Maybe it was all a conspiracy theory and it was there to teach him a lesson. Maybe actually he didn't learn his lesson and I'm actually picking up on somebody else's, you know, like there's all this joking around smelling people's farts, you know, like the one who smelt it dealt it, or that all comes, that's all just a profane way of saying the bell tolls for thee, you know, the bell of liberty tolls for thee, you know, something like that, you know, the call to something. Anyway, um, you know, what is your calling or something like that? And some people's calling, did they mishear it? Do they misunderstand it? You know, forgive them for they know not what they do. So is it a problem of knowledge or understanding? Do we just need knowledge? Is knowledge the solution to everything, you know? And that's a big question, you know, because if knowledge is accessible to everything, is that going to also sanitize things, you know? Maybe, maybe not, you know? Maybe with the chain of command, or with, let's say, the law as the mediator, that we have enough ability to repair things that it'll all be okay, you know, that after a certain level, I don't know how to describe that, but it actually comes from a technical point that has to do with, let's say, this issue of karma and dharma, which I can't even describe it using those two words because it is actually more finicky than that. And I can kind of describe it in these sociological labels, is that there are different trifectas, and trifectas all have their own sort of metaphorical truth that are locked into, from the three, produce a five-way bind. You know, so you have a scholar, you have a gentleman, and you have an alchemist, or a scientist, or whatever, or something like that. Or maybe let's stick with alchemist. And the thing is that the alchemist, like a gentleman and a scholar, is someone that because you know, a scholar reads for a living. They read knowledge, and a gentleman uses knowledge to the best of their ability. But the alchemist does knowledge, or produces it as well. Sort of, let's say, so. But what does it mean to does knowledge? You know, how does knowledge get produced? So the alchemist doesn't actually produce knowledge. The alchemist does knowledge production, but also does other things as well, maybe. And maybe they're good and bad alchemists, you know? So that so it's sort of like, you know, so it's like the gentleman uses knowledge. You know, all of this stuff is, all of these groups of three as well are like not good enough as well. So I just want to caution people on this. You know, this is, I'm just trying to show you that, like, they all are, because all of these components are made of dialecticals, but they're more like fractals, because you see one in the group of three is not like the other two, and then that goes into a fractal, and then that also has a group of three that maybe goes into a fractal. But you know, it's not an infinite regress. There is actually a particular model and a form, and you actually go overboard at some point. You actually go into the level of meta abstraction, which doesn't fucking make sense. It's just, you know, it's an abstraction of an abstraction. You know, yes, you can use things like that as base ingredients, but they're just dirt. They become part of the ground. but how confused are they? How double fucked are they? How double binded are they in their own self indulgent, whatever, So, anyway, now people in the world don't have to know this from this high level. I mean, I'm talking very highfalutin, esoteric almost. I don't know how easy this is to follow. But what we can do is we can improve the systems, we can improve the structure, we can structure the institutions, and hopefully they will stay because our language will stay. I mean, this is the history of the world, is the evolution of language and the evolution of the use of language. So maybe we would actually stabilize if our language didn't degrade because it developed past a certain point. Maybe we've been growing up and we had to grow down at certain points in our prehistory before we grew up as well. Maybe we're growing up and down and up and down and up and down, but at some point we get into a place where we're going up and up and up after a certain thing a certain threshold which we're able to meet. A certain level of maturity, one could even call it a spiritual evolution perhaps. And so that's sort of what I'm aiming at anyway. But anyway, long story short. Long story short. What can you do? At the end of the day, we don't just need availability of knowledge, we need accessibility of knowledge. But things are accessible based on your class, they're accessible based on your material ability. But I do think that essentially without intellectual property, if we can maintain a functioning market without intellectual property, and we work on commission, and I think that we can have a more dynamic kind of state that is more stateless, or at least people are not treating the state like a deadbeat dad, or like a sorry, the father of deadbeat dads. Like how Sauron breeds orcs with white marks on them. Or maybe am I Sauron? Sorry, not Sauron, Sauron. Oh fuck! I misread the letter. I didn't know if Lauren Southern was talking about Sauron or Sauron, because Sauron is the white wizard, and Sauron obviously is the eye, is the all-seeing eye. Wow, the movies kind of created a smaller image, a smaller storyline of the books. So I never read Tolkien's books, but I do think that Tolkien was slightly over-influenced by the fact that he was raised by a priest, and so there was a lot of other junk in his code. People, we should really ask people, what's your code? What's your code in life? What's your code in this or that? Please tell me your code so I don't offend you. And then it'll make it plain to them that they don't understand their own code. They don't understand their own. They don't know, because then they'll tell you, oh, I don't know what my code is. Oh, okay. Are you seeking to know? Like, are you looking for a code? And if they say no, then you know what they are. Maybe that's the uniform way of relating to people in terms of knowledge. Okay, anyway, I think I've spoken. I'm a little bit tired. I think I'm going to rest a bit, but I think that's a good recording. Good enough for me to be hopeful. Was that word that I was taught by Unwonted Contriver, Pollyanna. But am I being polyanistic or being poly? I can't remember what the suffixes are. I'll have to try to look it up. Anyway, it's based on it's based on the name of a person in a novel written by someone called Elgin. It was the first name or something. Anyway, I guess. Well, I might have another sleep. So good night, everyone. Okay, this is an addendum, and I'm continuing on from Unwanted Contriver. So now that I've given it from the top-down view, let me also go back and make some corrections and refinements on some technical points, which I will hopefully delve into, because now I've kind of moved on to the resolution, and I didn't record the sort of putrefaction that well, because I was still sort of doing it. But I didn't want to keep on recording that as well, because it was my voice was a bit sore, but it was also it's running out of steam, and so just kind of, you have to let things come to you. I must say I haven't laid out all those elements yet, or steps rather, of the alchemical sort of meditation. I've got it written down here somewhere. Okay, so I looked up Sischle's Sischle Ungubesi BC. I'll have to hear him say it a few times. I've only heard him say it once, and I'm not going to be able to remember it. Um, anyway, but I mean, how often do you say people's surnames? Because I was misremembering even how it was spelt. I wasn't sure how it was spelt because I just heard him say it once. And I must say, I don't try to remember people's names because it's sort of, I don't know what they mean. And I don't mean that they come from a language that I don't know what they mean. I don't remember someone's name unless, like, I remember everything that I know about them, which I've got in my mind. So, like, I have to have that properly updated. So I keep track of that, and keeping track of people is hard essentially, and it's sort of, you have to train your brain for that or something. But anyway, other people might be focusing on solving other problems. But okay, sorry, I'm jumping over the place here. Let me say a few things more. So the other way to go about dealing with these people, because I did give a pretty good example of how you can sort of out auto-poetic them, but essentially, they are sort of bully squads that are demeaning the culture. What they are trying to do is clear it out of any prescriptive voice other than the group, other than the lowest common denominator. Obviously, that's like morality by committee. So you're going to sort of, people are going to end up being cannibals or commit genocide or something like that, because stupid people really love this stuff and they go towards the lowest common denominator. Although you have to wonder how many people have just read some of those books that Unwanted Contriver cited that sort of obviously have some kind of agenda that is linked to maybe Marxism or something like that, or radical. Because the idea is that in a fully administrated society, which is not technically communism, because communism technically is stateless, but under the dictatorship of the proletarian, which in Leninism, not like the aberration of Marxism. Leninism is a deviation of Marxism. Everyone didn't like Lenin. So when you go that route, you're I would call you a Leninist instead of a Marxist. And a lot of people say, well, Leninism is orthodox Marxism. Well, the whole thing is like an atheistic church, and it's had church splits, and it's had, and Leninism is like, archetypally speaking, the pariah of the bunch, or the piranha of the bunch. And piranhas, do they eat other piranhas that are just a little bit weak? So it's a hard knock life for them, and they are living up to it. So, like, maybe they deserve that existence. They are creating their own hell. Well done. So I know. So the other way I think to take it is that you call them a trap, and then you say, well, because you see that's the other way, is that you basically ask them if they're a trap, and then if they get offended. So yeah, so I guess you don't call them a trap, but you say, "Oh, sorry, I really believed that you were a trap. I didn't like." You just say that, and then you shame them for, like, that's how you get out of it, because essentially they are traps. Like, that's the breaking the fourth wall, is that they are traps, and that's their whole existence essentially, is to bully people by being a trap. So then call them what they are, and then say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I should have asked you first. Are you a trap? Oh wait, didn't aren't you now, like, being, what is it? Uh, whatever they call it, genderphobic or something, so, or transphobic. like, like, have you been checked out for transphobia, like, because like this exchange, just it feels very transphobic, so if we can normalize calling people traps, and if everyone is called a trap, and then you describe, then maybe that becomes the bridge between saying like what they're a trap about, and it's like, oh, sorry, I see that you're a this trap and a that trap. So you see, that I think is the proper counter cultural resurgence against these people, is essentially you just work out what kind of trap they are, but in the meantime you can just call them traps or something like that, um, and just say, oh, I really think you are. I think you should come out of the closet. I think you're a trap that is trapped in the closet, and you should try to come out of it. Like that's the route that you can go, that I can see essentially, to outwitting them on the ground, as it were. And then if they uproar in a whole entire group, then you can just say, oh, this whole unruly sort of mob is a something trap. Can anyone work out what kind of trap this is? Like, is this a totalitarian trap? Is this the kind of like rule by the stupid? Is this, or okay, maybe that doesn't actually flow in a sequitur way. So maybe you should try and flow in a sequitur way. But if you start using language the way they use language to countermand them, then at least you can say, well, what am I not doing that you're not doing? Like, aren't we doing the same thing? Like, so, like, why are you complaining? I don't understand. Like, I'm just doing what you do, like, every day of your fucking life. Like, how is it different? And then that's what you leave them on. So I think that essentially is the way to counter them in the other way. But I did give also another thing where you can be more playful. So you can choose to be playful, or you can choose to be stern in how you deal with them. And so you just need to find the complexity to do it, to sort of unlock that. And if you're too natural, if you're too simple, if you're too basic to do that, then I mean, maybe go see a Scientologist, because like they can actually increase your intelligence and get you into an ability of communication where you can play, when you can really, like, Scientology was designed to help people improve their communication so that they can sort of track things, and that they can sort of run rings around people. So I mean, that's my general suggestion, because I mean, a lot of people, the problem is that I must say that I think that one of the big problems in India, or in most places that have many, many, many different languages, is that people think they understand, but no one knows if they've been understood, and that general condition is like undignified and dehumanizing on a societal level. And I think somehow, look, I'm completely speculating. I don't know, talking out my arse. But then on the lower level, maybe I think that children see how children are treated, especially if you grow up in a family that is like a low income commercial family, and that everyone is just a kind of tradesman by some, that if everything is a mutual exploitation, and you grow up in this idea that it's sort of, to be successful is to be a breeder. Like, you are just multiplying humanity. You are not being fruitful. Like, just being technically good at something, or saying that the competition will create technical excellence. Like, that is treating human beings like insects. It's bad. It's problematic. It's evil. It's that simple. So, I mean, the thing is that, like, you want to have a teaching. You want to be self-coherent and consistent, and you should try to work on that. Like, you need to have grounding in your life. You need to have an understand. You need to operate from an understanding. And saying that, like, I'm a breeder is, I guess, an understanding of something, but it's not. It's not. It doesn't replenish itself. It doesn't actually, like, if you continue down that road, I mean, you're also breaking other traditions in your lineage. So I would say that you're dishonoring your ancestors. You're dishonoring, like, that you've deviated um, from some script that you are actually in the midst of. You're following a script, but you're going off course of it. And so I would say that you need to kind of work out what side of the fence you're on, or work out your own libertarian philosophy to a degree to which that you're stable. So, like, stabilize your values, have principles that can actually be sturdy enough to stand up to scrutiny, and that's what these people are. These people are basically scrutiny. They're increasing the general standard of society. They're increasing the general intelligence. The unintelligent will not be able to breed because that is what they want. They get what they want, do they not? Now, maybe there are other issues here. There are issues of access, poverty, of, that they just don't have the opportunity, and so it would be nice if we could give people more opportunity, but, sometimes also if the opportunity is actually visible to them, but they don't take it, they don't choose to take it, they turn away from education, they go the other direction. That's like maybe they deserve their lot in life. Like, yes, history has dealt them a bad hand or something like that. I mean, yes, you can say that, like, if you don't treat people well in their low years, in their early years, that they're traumatized or whatever. But so maybe people need counseling and things like that. I mean, again, there's also hopefully that there'll be people. I mean, like, this is what religion is for. But I mean, obviously it sucks if you go. I mean, that's generally speaking, that's where you get free therapy. If you want free therapy, you join a church. That's like what a church is there to do, essentially. But I mean, some churches have a higher quality, have a higher teaching, than others. Other churches are I don't know, are replicas or something, or they're pretenders, and so it's like, I mean, energy is a problem as well. Just in terms of caloric burning energy to get somewhere or whatever. But this is where you get systemic corruption and systemic oppression. Like, South Africa is being systemically oppressed by a black government that is inefficient to sort of conserving and generating wealth and essentially giving their population. But I wonder, you see, like, the problem is that the whites, let's just say, in transitioning after apartheid, thought that sort of all the black people are just like black people, but they're not the same. They're different, and there's intra tribe conflict and tension, and in some sense the only thing holding that together are the white people. So you have to sort of have a common enemy to bring you together, and so the more that they rely on the common enemy, the more fractious they are in terms of their elite, in terms of their cannibalism, which then is obviously resulting in the poor. And the poor can't get this message. They don't understand it. Like, because they, didn't get a high quality teacher and at the right time, or their mother or their father or whatever is too impoverished. So it's a catch-22. It's a catch-22. That's the problem. Like, when do we actually escape the catch-22 of it all? And the catch-22 sometimes exists in some people's heads. And when it exists in people's heads, it exists as the salt dialectic thing. So they've been stigmatized about something in the world, and then it eventually imprints on their body, or it started with their own view on their body, and then it's projected onto the world, and it starts in one metaphor, and then it, by association, moves across. And so you have like mimetic viruses in the sixth dimension of psychological reality, the salt, which is the immediate thing that sort of, it's not exactly the blood, but it's sort of, it is, there's some salt in the blood and there's some salt in the flesh. Oh, that relates to the flesh, rather, if we can get the language. So, I mean, it's interesting that there's a kind of biological parallel to at least my dimensional models, which I haven't gone through in great detail. At some point will have to make in-depth, sort of things about that. I do need to brush up on my, because you see, the thing is that in my model, essentially, there are 6 elements there are 4 elements in each dimension, but you kind of have to understand the dimension before and the dimension after to put it in context. So if you sort of add that context, then it's longer, and then if you add more context, then the string is even longer. in terms of the number of steps there are. But anyway, this is complicated. And you can also go beyond the number of possible steps and then go all the way back around again and start again. So it's just a merry-go-round. So that's what alchemy is. It's a merry-go-round of generating judgments that are essentially metaphorical, which means that they are perspectival in their let's see, what did I say again? That the subconscious is the personal, so it's a personal perspective. The unconscious is a what? What is the unconscious? What is the unconscious? Man, I don't know what the unconscious is. It's the private. I guess you could say it's the private and the secret. That the superego is the secret, maybe. That's a bit of a generic term. So I mean, so you get sort of the internal locus of control, which is the superego, and you get the external locus of control, which is the private. And then you get ego judgments, which I have called the public. But in some sense, that only makes sense within actually how law works on a base level. I mean, sort of on a complete level. In terms of, so this is all to do with sort of legal theory. This is all a form of legal theory. And then the point is that, so I mean, this is where, when you look at the free man, the sovereign citizen kind of crowd people, and then they have, some of them are very, or perhaps don't know as much as they should and things like that, because they're sort of dabbling in things and pretending at things and trying to, sort of undermine the state when they don't really actually have the mentality to actually get around it. When like you can use just financial instruments and things like that. You can just correspond with the officers. Like you can, you can. I don't want to give secrets away because like if you just study, this is in books. Like although I mean, I'm doing it in my head, I guess, but you just need to find experts, and you need experts to write a book about it, and then to kind of synthesize it maybe with psychology and spirituality, so it's accessible for everyone. So it's kind of like the book of power that everyone can kind of like, if they can read it, they can understand it, and if they can understand it, they can use it, sort of thing, to get what they want. Because like there's a level at which law operates that you can get to within every decent system of jurisdiction in the world. And when you get to that place, like there is no intellectual property. Like Britain, which is a member of the Commonwealth, has something called a ISA, ISA, which means income. I can't remember what it stands for, but the ISA. Let me just look on the dictionary again. ISA, a UK investment product with no tax on income or any capital gains. Individual savings account. So an ISA is used in the UK, and it means individual savings account. So if you just have access to your individual savings account, which there is something like that which actually exists in the state, which is essentially you access it through the long form of the birth certificate. And you have to do proper correspondence to that. You have to make application to High Court for that, and that is essentially how you stop being a person. So if you don't want to be subject to the regulations of the state, there's already a way for you to escape being regulated by the state. You just have to make your own trusts, and you have to you have to essentially unlock yourself from the system, which means you need one other person at least to help you do that. Because you basically, what you do is you bond each other. I can't remember what it's called, what the instrument is called. You make a constructive trust where essentially you value each other's life to a certain amount, and then so basically, if somebody else arrests you and they don't have cause, you have a contractual right to their value, and so like what you do is you like bond each other, and then you contract each other, and then that contract is with money, and then so if you are being interrupted in your day-to-day life by somebody else, you've got a contractual means of remedy against them. So you use the law of contract essentially to outsmart people that are trying to use regulations, because this very clearly works in South Africa, because you have the magistrates court and you have the high court. If a magistrates court is ever talking to you and you are a defendant, or you are a what's the civil thing called, if you are a defendant, or if you are you get a plaintiff and I can't remember what it's called. Oh, fuck, man, I've forgotten all the jargon, but I know the concepts. You get a plaintiff and you get a plaintiff and a defendant, and then if you're being charged with a regulation, then you are also the accused. So you are accused in the magistrates court. Now, if you are properly legally got your affairs in order, like a decent person, but let's say like a properly decent person, and that also, let me be utterly precise, like a discerning, if you are a proper discerning individual that has all their affairs put in order, then what you will do is already then the magistrate will have no recourse against you, because a magistrate is a creature of statute, and it only has purview over your juristic person. And so essentially, if you dissolve your juristic person, or you create some other trust mechanism, I mean, I'm talking slightly speculatively because I haven't done this. In fact, the best way to do it is when you are in front of a high court judge, because if you're in front of a high court judge, then what you will do is you'll basically conscript them as your secretary, because a high court judge in the South African judiciary is everything. The high court judge has to have universal jurisdiction on subject matter, which means that the high court judge will be a banker, will be anything. Like, they can grant permission for anything. They have universal jurisdiction on subject matter, not universal jurisdiction on geography. So, but in terms of subject matter, anything that happens, they can make a ruling about it. Obviously, they can say, no, this is not ripe, or something like that, and they can send you away. Anyway, so the structure is there, and so you just make application, or you make special application, or something like that. You see, I don't know all the jargon things. So, maybe if you go there, you have to sort of talk nicely to the master of the court. But if you don't know anything about anything, maybe you should study up first. I mean, maybe you should talk to a legal expert on admiralty law. I actually know one. Maybe I should try and learn something from him so I can stop sounding like a retard, like a keen retard on this stuff. But no, I don't think I sound like a retard. I think I sound keen and because I mean, I have even called my own cousin in open court in America. I've called my own cousin a legal idiot, and there's no shame in being a legal idiot. He didn't know what to think about that, and I said, I can't remember, because I said it in front of the judge, and then I had to explain it to him afterwards, because he was slightly upset. I could tell, that he trusted me enough not to disquiet, and not to, because I was defending him, or I was defending his interest rather. I was representing him. So I was trying to be his legal counsel, even though I'm not credentialed in America. So, the other lawyer was already making fun of me, but I was far more intelligent than them, and I took them to the cleaners. And I made a very cogent argument to the judge, not based on any precedent, just based on common sense and reason, and let's say common equity. And I was able to make the whole case in the construction, and then they settled with me because they could tell that, if I guess if that went to trial and I made that kind of case, that they would have been taken to the cleaners. They might have been taken for everything. So that's what you do, is you always try to settle when it looks like it's going against you. But I mean, I tried everything I gave them notices in person. I gave them offers of negotiation and to explain what my case is against them. They had no interest. They were just like, who the fuck are you? You are a stupid little pleb or whatever. And so and I mean, I wasn't gouging them at all. I mean, when they made the settlement, like I mean, I was, this, I even explained it to my cousin, because I said, you could get a lot more, but I just, I don't even try to go for full justice. I just try to go for the majority, like a good majority of the justice. And that, so I think that he got back 95%, because you see, if he had his affairs in order in some sense, but in some sense it was their fault that his affairs weren't in order, because that was their job and they didn't do their job essentially. But I didn't want to take. I left them with something, because they did put effort and concern into their work. Truth be told, one of their lawyers even consulted me, because I have quite a big name. I mean, I've helped many lawyers in America to come up with just at the right time, come up with give them a consultation. I mean, sometimes I just give them free advice. I just sit in the aisle, and because someone told me to please sit here, and when someone walks past, they're going to have a question or something like that, and like as a lawyer walks past, I said, and I said, and there's something in their face or whatever, and I say to them, hey, and they say hey, and then they just say, oh, I'm about to be pilloried or something, or like I don't know what I'm going to say, and I say, oh, perhaps I can help you, sir. Can you explain the crux of the issue? And then they'll just ask the question, and then I'll just like very quickly synthesize something, and it sort of pieces it together, and that's what justice is in America. It's a kind of sort of alchemy, which is sort of, I would argue, not that useful. But anyway, what's the point? Well, I'm talking about myself too much. Because I'm trying to get the ball rolling off the cliff so that we can actually get somewhere that we want to be, rather than because that's the problem, is that if you don't sort of shock the system perhaps into self-realization enough, there's it's just going to continually be corrupted by these power centers that continually have this structural institutional corruption of intellectual property. That's all I want. I want two things. I want international law to properly care about democracies. Like I want I want actual enforcement of the Geneva Convention, essentially, which we don't have. We don't have real mechanisms of enforcement, and to have a mechanism of enforcement, you actually need investigative powers that fact find. You need to actually work out what the true state of affairs is, and that you need to have a kind of expert of justice agency that is independent and that is sort of incorruptible, which means that, I don't know, you have to have some kind of ideological idea that everyone believes that it's properly being administered, as it were. You need a real hall of justice, not just a shouting match. And so for that, we need some kind of common accord in the world, I would say. The other thing is that yeah, I mean, I do like the South African legal system. Uh, I think that, it would be interesting, because for me to argue out the South African legal system in contradistinction to the American sort of, because I mean, America is the modern day Library of Alexandria. I mean, that's the whole point of them, is just to accumulate. I mean, they just accumulate knowledge. That's their whole purpose in life, is to sort of do justice by it's all a big experiment, and they're collecting all the data. And so, like, even the full constitutional papers of my country are in the American Congress, which even Nelson Mandela took there himself, because in my library system you can't even find the constitutional papers, the original constitutional papers. The public, it is not accessible to the public to get a full set of constitutional papers, but in America you can see it in the Library of Congress. I try to encourage Mandy to inquire after that for me, because I'm a foreigner, so I don't know if the Library of Congress would correspond with me. But I mean, if they're talking to one of their own citizens, I would think that they. I mean, I don't know exactly what the procedure and the law is on the matter, but I would think that if you corresponded with them, that you could request them, and obviously you might have to pay for them, for the printing, and the copying and the mailing and the work of the person doing that grunt work. But I mean, I would certainly pay for that. I would love to have proof of my involvement in the formation of the Constitution. But I mean, what good it'll do me, when we're on the way to the Gulag, when we're on the way to ethnic cleansing, essentially, or unless the ANC gets voted out of power. As they keep on sort of encroaching on liberty and going towards creating this kind of authoritarian state. Or do we go with the model where we just try to avoid the state, but then as society continues to radicalize, if it continues to make the other evil, if it keeps on othering other people, then isn't the problem that, although on paper everything will be hunky-dory, in practice it's going to be a bloodbath? So that's the thing that you have to sort of, that's the sensibility that the social justice warriors, which they really are like machines. I mean, they are literally robots. But anyway, I've given two methods to sort of counter them. I would still say that the way to go about it is, because if you just avoid them and you actually try to make independent institutions, that's like there's like the long-term solution and the short-term solution. And you have to apportion your time between the long-term solution and the short. Oh, here's what I forgot to say this, and this was the whole point of one of my whole tangents. How many lives is a British officer worth? Is he worth the lives of all his men? Do you know what the answer to that is? I don't know what it is. It's the British officers were, I don't know if they're given guidelines for this, or they're given sort of poetical, metaphorical guidelines for this very vexing question. How many, before, like, how much value should a British officer, when you are an officer and you are a commander of men below you, how much weight do you give to your own life relative to the lives of your brothers in arms? And they tried to work out some kind. There is no right answer. Is the short answer. There is no right answer, but a British officer should try to be able to make that determination. Essentially, is what it actually means when you read between the lines of whatever the guidelines are. But that is what made the British Empire great, because that question vexed the British officer class. And that is how, and it was only able to do that because everything else in Britain was ordered so well from the top down. So above that, 10% of the peers were all intellectual geniuses that were admitted into the peerage. Like Sir Roger Scruton, Sir Roger Penrose. These are the elite which are admitted into the aristocracy because they are actually truly great people that deserve to be a caliber above. They are in a higher echelon, as it were. And they orchestrated it so well that they actually allowed officers to be vexed with this beautiful question, which is a deep spiritual question. Because if you because you see, you have to care about unwanted population, essentially. You let's juxtapose that with the core traditional concern in Indian spirituality is the problem of unwanted population. And if you try to avoid unwanted population for the fact of wanting to avoid unwanted population, then that's a double-binded paradox. That's the mirror looking into the abyss, looking into itself. If you try, you damned if you do, you damned if you don't, because don't think about pink elephant, and then you do. It's that kind of double bind. Okay, so you have to, as an indirect effect, you have to worry about unwanted population. That's the same thing that like caring about equality is, because it's a quality of what? It's a quality of equal protection and benefit under the law. Not equal protection, not equal benefit and protection under the law. And that means that if we have a psychological understanding about different things, and we have different streams of people, then maybe we should put psychology into politics, or maybe not, because that will actually sterilize us from the top down. I don't know. I mean, who should decide how their own people are treated? And is that what is happening with the ANC government? Or are they mobilizing their people into a state of agitation? And I mean, look at what happened in the July riots. And now the country is getting poorer because people left the country. So, peace, peace. Blessed are the peacemakers, but the peacemakers are not the conflict avoiders. But can we also have some time? I mean, how about you don't try to teach me the lesson by creating the commotion? How about you actually teach it to me? But what about the people that don't want to be taught? And then we have the J.R.R. Tolkien thing, which is that if people are being corrected and they don't want to take the correction, then maybe they should just be, maybe that's the natural justice. Is that then they should be executed or something like? I mean, that's what the J.R.R. Tolkien said in his letters, although they're a bit coded with all this weird stuff, with all this influence from his ideal fantasy stuff, from his story. And I don't know, I think as long as we preserve life, I think that we should preserve life. I think that, unless they're asking for it, and I mean that in terms of like, it's a self. Anyway, I mean, I have to get into the medical ethics question, because that is a huge question, because it's very, very complicated. And like, because you actually do have to go through guidelines. And I did actually, in my earlier thinking, I did actually come up with a model that solves that, but it's still slightly esoteric, or at least it's hidden in my notes somewhere, or it's hidden in my writing on my phone or something. Anyway, but I also wonder, how much we're becoming like China just because the ANC wants to try to make my content unaccessible to other people, because they are wanting to stay in power by any means, and maybe they've already stolen an election, we don't even know. And the integrity of the election certainly seems compromised. So it would be nice to have foreign eyes on this. It would be nice to have foreign attention. It would be nice to have China and Japan, or just Japan, or just Germany, just some country that has someone that we wouldn't mind having guns on our streets, someone that we wouldn't mind inviting in and making everything feel more secure and stuff like that. But have it be a foreign power, not a local power, like a very peaceful foreign power, a very peaceful foreign power. So someone that has a reputation, Thailand would be perfect. Thailand is like the country in the world that it's never been ruled by a foreign power. Even the British never took it over. So it's been completely independent. The problem is that it's got local corruption in its politics. Although, but whenever it gets too corrupt, the king steps in and asks the person to step down, and then everyone respects the king and the society so much that it happens, that the person has to do it. So the king can sort of send people off on their way. But maybe what they're doing is they're actually ruling badly on purpose, because the people, like, their political organizations. I mean, I feel like I'm being stonewalled. I've tried every which way to get into my local political party, and I think, I don't know. Well, I made it. They gave me the interview, I guess. Maybe they just didn't like the cut of my jib, or they just thought I wasn't ready, or they just thought, this is a problem. This guy is not on message. He's going to disrupt. He's going to rock the boat. Uh, and I am a bit of a loose cannon. That's why I want to be the public protector, so that I can be a loose cannon and get down to the heart of the matter and actually be reasonable about things and not be political about them, so I can basically substitute for the president's judgment and force him to contend with the facts and say, no, 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 no. What you are saying now, you're not dealing with the heart of the issue. You're dealing with you say that you want to solve the problem to one question, but you're actually answering another question. You're conflating separate. You should deal with these issues and you shouldn't conflate these issues. You're conflating the issue, and some issues that you can deal with them as conflations, but you have to prioritize which issue should, so it gets muddled up, it gets confused, like confusio. So like maybe some confusions are useful cultural stepping stones, because maybe for completely ulterior reasons it's the way to go, it's the way to move forward. So there's a kind of complexity in history that is part of the mystery of the Holy Ghost, I would say. To put it in scriptural terms, let's put it in another term. So like, I really don't know what's happening in my society. I'm speculating that like the ANC is forcing Kuberg to like have a nuclear meltdown. Obviously we need more nuclear engineers, because we can't give up Kuberg, so we already have nuclear. We need to get better at it, and we need obviously to import foreign people. So and obviously we're a poor African country, and things have gone very bad for us the last 20 years. Other people have only had problems in the last 5 years, from the lockdown or whatever. We have been in a lockdown, in an economic slump already for like 15 years now, or something like that. So, we are further along in history. Like in terms of history, South Africa is your future. You are all going to use renewable energy and develop that stuff, and you're going to fuck your economy apart, because it's going to be so inefficient that the price of energy is going to go up. And that is the definition of poverty. When the cost of energy goes up, you live in you are in an impoverishing society. You are an impoverishing. You see, that's in the present tense. You're on a track. You're on a track towards impoverishing yourself. But you can't really say impoverishment, because you don't know the future. So you don't know what will actually be in the future impoverishment. So don't predict what will be impoverishment, if things can still be averted and things can still come together in a perfect harmony, in a perfect chorus of such and such. Okay, so all of that, I've already given my idea about what should be done locally. So, maybe I'm just, maybe I'm being a local alchemist and a foreign gentleman and a foreign scholar all at once. Who knows? And I was also going to clean up some of my own jargon between the unconscious and the superego, and talk and say that sort of the secret part of it, you could call the superego dharma, and you can call the unconscious karma, but the unconscious is both you and the world, and you could actually be more strong than the world, or it's sort of, so where you are might also be related to the dharma of the superego. So if you know the condition, if you can actually see the superego, like I can with my metatype thing, but in some sense I still don't know what the base of humanity is. I still think that we could all be metatype 13s. I think we are always metatype 13s, but we're either above water, which means that we're a positive, or let's say a well acclimated ecosystem of metatypes within us, because we have to understand the other metatypes and order them inside of us and rally them. Maybe that's a weird word. That sounds like, because you rally legions, so maybe that connotates to some people things of Satan and the devil. But I'm just talking about having a proper self-realized self-understanding, which allows you to connect with people in a loving way or whatever. So anyway, God is love, as they say. And so God is the heart of the understanding, is the core feature of the understanding, even though it might look peculiar to you. It says about Christ consciousness, or it says about Christ in the Christian scriptures, it says, and they will be a peculiar people, even unto himself. Okay. Thus ends the lesson. Okay, I think that wraps everything up nicely. And, there are many folds that have sheep in them, essentially. By the way, and when I'm talking about medical ethics, there's just going to be a set of guidelines and sort of procedural steps. It's not going to be definitively one size fits all kind of approach. It's going to be psychologically technical, as it were. Um, and, I have to understand things that I don't know yet in terms of, that what would be appropriate for what stage, and in terms of guidelines. But essentially it's all is around the point that you do not touch what is private, because it's in confusion, and therefore you don't know how it's going to resolve, and so you don't treat what is unconscious, essentially, unless it's fully conscious. And that's the problem, is that some people have had karma, or you have to know their dharma to contextualize their private. So, you have to understand the secrets, the superego, before you can say whether they have, because you see, yeah, you have to put the private in context with the secret. And if you don't do that, then you don't know what you're doing, essentially. So, like, so the idea of essentially that complicated dynamic being relegated to some kind of like natural law order is, in my view, is unwieldy. It doesn't combine, and so you sort of, the best you can do is sort of guidelines, and we inherit this guideline from all our traditions, I think, which is that the doctor does not touch the heart. The doctor does not perform surgery on that which is private, unless it's been made essentially public, essentially, in the judgment. But then you also have to be psychologically sure that what has been made public is not a conflation of an issue that was an unconscious confusion between dharma and somebody else's karma. So that you are taking on somebody else's thing, like you're projecting something onto it. So there's a difference between dharmic, superego, secret self, the secret self that I guess Paul van der Klee talks about. There's a difference between that and private unconscious drama, which is maybe you and other people in a confusio, or unless if you have a decent enough internal locus of control. If you have a decent enough internal locus of control, now that is also unsettling, because I would say that how can you prove that you've got a decent internal locus of control? You'd have to kind of test that, so that would have to have some kind of aptitude thing that would be psychometric or psychological assessment, which in some sense it can never be scientifically ascertainable in some sense. So like if we just say that if we separate medicine and psychology, and I don't know if we're going to say that medicine is a science and psychology is, I don't know what we're going to classify that as. So this is, so I would say you can only do something if it's reversible, if it's elective. If it's elective, the best practice would be to not do something unless, and when I say reversible, I mean that there will actually be it's not that that technically someone would be able to reverse it sometime somewhere. I mean, like, that it's sort of, it's proximately capable of being reversed. Um, so that would sort of be best practice, because then essentially you can always just push the rewind button on the elective surgery. So if you can push the rewind button on what's being done, then it's cool, like, because then it's sort of, anyway, I mean, for obvious reasons, I mean, like for common sense reasons, I don't know if I can if I should lay out a full substantiation for that. I mean, that seems to me eminently sort of reasonable. And then you're going to promote self-experimentation. And I do actually think that there is room for experimentation. Obviously, if we have a culture that has completely acclimated to tolerance to experimentation, and that, like, when does the experimentation ever end, or like when do people actually reach stable internal things or something like that, And so this has, the question of, can you enter paradise east of from the east, or in what direction are they, can you approach Eden by any direction, and is Eden actually the destination? Is Eden metatype 13 properly self-realized, So, because I also think that I thought that I achieved the perfection of metatype 13, but then I was not done yet, because I sort of had to understand metatype 14, 15, 16, 17, so that I didn't carry them badly in me, because although I think that they exceed metatype, they exceed faith, they still have to be, I don't know how to even describe it. I mean, they have to be processed, essentially. So, I mean, I wonder if in Scientology those things aren't that, metatype 14 would, maybe it's correspondent to some grade or something, or maybe that's why they do it before the grades. Maybe like the clear, to go clear is like you're doing the work of the post grades first, and then you do the grades second, because if you don't do it in that order, that makes sense, I guess. But I wonder how contemporaneous the pre-clear process is, because I imagine that I could do it. Well, maybe that's a test. I mean, I'd have to see if I can try to be a natural auditor, or maybe I have to be just only a field auditor. Damn, I wet my napkin. Oh, that's weird. Did I have something to wipe with it? Was I being, what's the word? What's the word that means premonition, or cognizant or something? Anyway, see, it's weird when people think about the future. I don't think about the future as a place. I think about it as a space in relation to myself. Anyway, and I did add something to matter, energy, space, and time. There was something else, but I can't remember. It was in one of my earlier recordings before I even spoke to Unwanted Contriver. I should maybe go back to that, because that might help me also formalize the medical ethics guidelines, although they would maybe, you see, now, actually, they're not actually capable of being guidelines yet, because I would actually have to sort of still get generic experience of the actual sort of contexts that are, like, because, sort of, you have to make guidelines relative to sort of cultural things, in the sense that, like, perhaps you have to be aware of, well, unless you can independently diagnose, like what's going on in the unconscious, to sort of be an unconscious expert, which is maybe something like psychological sociology, or, sort of the same theme that was in that sci-fi series, what's his name, Foundation. Yeah, Foundation. Sorry, I should just be clear about this. So, like, the last 8 minutes was a third addendum, which was essentially all to do with my interests and my study and my research and things like that. So, I'm sorry I appended it to Unwanted Contrivers, because I was working with Unwanted Contriver, and I feel like, I've distributed my attention between his pain and his grief and his complicated life story, and my own selfish interest to develop, psychology. So, I don't know what to do about that. I feel slightly awkward about it, but there's not much I can do to, sort of, we are in the same world together. We share the same space. We are both humans, we're both agents. And, I would like to rescue Unwanted Contriver from whatever is binding up his agency. And obviously, we live in conditions today that are problematic, that are, that are causing a lot of problems in the world. To tell you the truth, I think one of my grandfathers, not my living grandfather, but my passed on grandfather, was somewhat responsible for it, because he said to me things, sometimes cryptic things, about that there was a plan that was going to happen, and he told me elements of it, and I said, "Oh, that sounds terrible," and then he said, "Why?" And then I actually gave him a good reason, and then it made him, and then I explained because he was a Francophile. My grandfather was absolutely obsessed with France, and so he was probably into all those philosopher things, but he was probably connected to, like he was a Rosicrucian, so that was sort of his wavelength, and he was always very far from the family. I mean, I only met him like 3 times my whole life, like 3 or 4 times on 4 different occasions, maybe five actually. No, yeah, maybe like 5 or 6, because yeah, he would much later when I was much older, then him and Sylvie would come by when they were like, I don't know, he was always doing other things that I have no idea about. Like I think they went to America for a visit, and then they flew back, and then on the way back they went through Cape Town, so they came through. So they never came to us, especially. They just sort of were on the way. If it was by the by, I don't know how to say it. They just dropped by if it was, not especially so. And then that's why I went to them, essentially. I think I went to them twice, or 3 times in Durban. That's my only other experience of like a big city. And then I also saw my great aunt, which was my other grandmother's sister, not the former wife, from my other side of the family, from my maternal grandmother. So it was my paternal grandfather with his second wife, Sylvie, who was like my fifth grandmother. Oh, sorry, my fifth grandparent. And then I also met Auntie Googie there. She's now also passed on. And she taught me so much about Christianity. She gave me a very interesting primer, and I was always afraid of her. She was a strict woman. I couldn't believe it when she told me that she was a remedial teacher, because I was like, wow, you must teach your children very differently from how you treat your family, which is a bit strange. Which is a bit strange. So she was obviously carrying something, because her own daughter, she also divorced someone because she wanted to have a child, and she got married to the man before she found out if he wanted children or not. And so when he didn't want children, she couldn't believe it, and then she ended up having to divorce him. He forced her to divorce so she couldn't get over it, because she's from a Catholic background. So her worldview was very annoyed. I mean, I'm projecting this slightly because this didn't come out of her mouth, but I'm just piecing this together now, thinking about it. That because now it makes sense to me, because I didn't understand it when she said it to me. Like it just went in one ear and out the other, because I didn't connect with anything, because I didn't know the context, because I didn't know the Catholic background of my maternal sort of side, or at least, yeah, of the family, or my mother's parents. And so what happened was that so she so she's Catholic, and her husband isn't even Catholic, and I guess she just assumed that like everyone wants to reproduce, or something like that, because that's the sort of the Catholic indoctrination, is that sort of multiply, have children, or something like that. And her husband, didn't want to do that, and so and she just assumed it. And then when she discovered that after they got married, because she never bothered to ask, or she hoped, I guess, or she just thought that it, she thought that she had enough leverage that she wouldn't have to ascertain it. And this is terrible that I'm flaunting my family's secrets and my family's private life, or whatever, but this is almost personal to me, and I'm making the private public from my personal. I mean, that's, is that not a violation of, how much are we allowed to relay about third parties that are deceased? Don't talk ill of the dead. I mean, I'm not talking ill of her. I mean, but I am explaining the complication, the sorrow of her life. And so, because essentially, it wasn't that she was divorced. She, as a Catholic, had to divorce him if she wanted to go and have children with someone, which is what she did. And so she married a man who already had a family, and she helped raise that child. And so it was kind of like a two household merger. So it was complicated. And she was very nice to the adoptive child, and she was much harsher to her own child. And I think that she was doing that to overcompensate in order to make sure that no one could think that she was playing favorite. So she was I mean, that's a pure projection, but I mean, but I wonder if that also is somewhat tied up with the fact that she had to divorce her husband, which for someone with a Catholic background and a Catholic indoctrination, sort of is sort of that now she's already made a huge error in her life. Now she doesn't want to compound any more sins. She wants to sort of, I don't know, like, or because she doesn't want to compound her sins that she believes from her indoctrination. But the problem is actually that she doesn't believe in the indoctrination that much, because she doesn't think that she made a mistake, or she chose the lesser of two evils, and she doesn't know if she should have stayed to convince him, or she didn't know what the problem was, or she couldn't get him to go for medical tests so that she could know if it was like, what the issue was, or if it was just what he wanted or didn't want, because that kind of made a difference. Or I don't know what went on between them. I mean, I guess I could go and find out. I mean, I don't know if it's. I mean, I've met the man. He's a wonderful man. He's always been close to the family. Um, he's part of the sort of the commercial fabric, as it were, of the ecosystem that is part of the family history. So we have associations, and I mean, I've always treated him like. I mean, I don't know what it's called. If you have a great aunt, you have a great uncle, I guess, and he's never been overbearing. I mean, one time I think he walked up to me at a place that I was at. I think it was like a country club or something, or a golf course or something. I think he plays golf, and we had a very interesting conversation. And he told me some things, and I didn't quite understand or recognize, because I didn't know who my great aunt was married to. Like, I didn't know the family history, because my grandmother would never tell me these things, because well, she just had issues with her sister, as sisters will likely have issues. And there was always some issue between them, which goes on from much. I mean, I know roughly what the drama is, how it started. It's very sort of strange kind of sibling rivalry, and sort of, because that's what happens. I was told that's what happens. I was told by somebody else who was actually Catholic, who was a friend of mine at school. He told me this interesting thing. He was like, oh no, his mother told me this. His mother told me this interesting sort of bit of knowledge. She said she read a book about child rearing, and it gave a guideline that you should not have children within 2 years, because if you have an age gap between siblings is 2 years, if they're the same sex, it's very troublesome, because they will kind of niggle each other, they will elbow each other, and then you'll create, this, the word niggling is like doubt. You'll create niggling doubts, like you'll just um, and that, wow, is that like now a racially pejorative term to use? I mean, that's just the English language that I was taught by probably my grandmother. I mean, I would always ask my grandmother and my mother what words meant. And my mother is actually, she's terrible at maths. She can't do maths at all, pretty much. She makes mistakes with maths unless she uses a calculator. She has to use a calculator essentially, but she can do. Maybe I should try teach her Ionian mathematics. Um, Ionian numerals. I've always thought that some people might do that, but anyway, better than the Western numeral system. But anyway, it does change notation quite a bit though. But because you can, if you do math with Ionian numerals, there are intuitive. I actually invented. I was when I visited India. There's a little sect there that they're like mathematicians, and then they meditate on this, and they always are trying to come up with new knowledge in their field to add to their book is the sort of the thing. And after they taught me all the basics of their rules, and I proved to them that I was a genius essentially because I was able to do things that exceeded sort of their people, although I wasn't willing to put in the time to like really, because I wasn't interested so much, just to sort of experience. And I did increase, because like to what's the word, to graduate from their order, you have to sort of exceed, you have to create something new, that sort of is a new sort of methodology or something like that, and you have to sort of be able to make a prediction. And the one that I made was I called the wave. Essentially, I worked out within their numeral system and within their intuitive laws and things like that, a thing that creates a I can't remember it exactly, but I know it was basically a wave function. Um, because I guess in that system, it must have been a formula. Is that you can notate formulas, but you have to do it with words. You can't do it with. You have to do it in a kind of metaphor. They have a metaphorical conjunction to their numeral system, which is obviously from the lineage of the Ionian, um, kind of, the Vedic, Arabic, Ionian numeral system is I believe it's basically the same. Although I saw it in there, so I guess I don't know. I mean, I read that, so I don't know if all those things are actually connected, but I believe that they are. Um, just disclaiming my ignorance. Anyway, I derailed myself so bad. Yeah, so I mean, this is, I think, that we could optimize life and education and pedagogy by streaming people, but then also by not streaming people, you also create a kind of variety or something like that. So, I don't know if you. The thing is that if you have an understanding of these things, how do you administer the understanding is a completely independent, separate question. Um, you know, what is one to do? Not sure. Anyway, but I mean, I'm focusing on ethics and sort of going down the list. But right now, I'm focusing on unwanted contriver. Um, or rather, I think what I'm doing now is I'm admitting my own biases and I'm admitting my own state of mind and reporting on essentially how, or at least I'm giving a decent sample about how this interacts with my secrets and my private. So maybe, and even my personal. So I'm making confessions on all of those grounds. So maybe a surgeon, if they do anything, they should actually have to be forced to do the same. That they should have to declare how it connotates in their mind, in their sensibility, in their enculturation. That if you don't make a kind of enculturation reporting on yourself, or admission as it were, and perhaps you should even be interrogated by a third person to make sure that it's all on the up and up and it's above board, and so that there should be a kind of independent agency that does this. Obviously, I do think that it would be nice to have an arbitration service that is private, that is not public, as in to say that it's not. Maybe I'm mixing my jargon with the old jargon of the old world. I don't know if we even in an old world, and if we're in a new world from an old world, or if it's the same world. But I mean, it seems different to me at least. But I don't know if it's different for other people. So what is my point? What is my point? Is that even if you lay this down in the law, there's no thing that it's going to actually be carried out, that it's going to be upkept, that it's going to be sustained. So, there's no way to like actually enforce. You have to hope and you live as you pray and life continues. on and forever, amen. Something like that, perhaps. Anyway, so all these things. Okay, man. So it just took me 16 minutes to disclaim the fact that I made an 8-minute, let's say, deviation from focusing on unwanted contrivers things, and I've mixed it up with my stuff. So anyway, I just gave a small example, I think, of one's self confession, of one's of one's purport, of one's intentions, of one's views and such. So yeah, I would say surgeons should have to do that. So it's subject matter for subject matter, something of a quid pro quo. Like I do something for you, I have to that I'm changing the state of knowledge in the world. I better leave a log. I better leave a record of in my own accounting why it is that I'm doing it. And if I'm just a jabber jobber, if I'm just a useless, kind of paycheck grubbing civil servant or something like that, maybe that's the maybe we need to weed out those weeds from the gardens of the institutions or something like that. People who have no bedside manner, who don't know what the guidelines should be, or they're not capable of fulfilling the guidelines if they were there, but the guidelines aren't there yet, so they can't be properly, let's say, indoctrinated or enculturated, because the culture of the system itself is broken, I would say. Like the actual structure of, doctoring in terms of that it's state licensed. At least if you went to a non-state doctor, at least if you asked them for advice and you felt very strange on a personal level, you can just say, oh, that guy's a witch doctor. And then you could go find somebody else, but you can't do that now if you are dependent on the state, and if the state has a standard of care, and then it's like, it's like being abducted by an alien, because you're being abducted by all the structural inadequacies of people who have made systems. And if you can't optimize a system, or if you can't work towards optimizing a system with an actual view of arriving, like get out of the way for somebody who can administer things, who can be a responsible, multi-varied, I mean, obviously I don't know all the pertinent facts, but I can make inquiries as to ascertain them, I would say. I mean, I think that I'm a pretty good investigator, but I mean, maybe I can't really say that, because things have just been delivered to me by God, That's sort of how I feel about it. I mean, my life, I think, is a little bit of a testimony to that. Anyway, what do the people say when they protest? They say, we shall overcome. And I have said, my understanding shall overcome. Which I think is the spirit. The understanding is the spirit. It's where you're going. It's where you're headed. It's where you're off to. Anyway. Oh, I didn't sleep. When am I going to have my second sleep now then? Okay. That's what it, I guess. I just want to, this is the fifth, I think, or fourth addendum. I just want to round this up by quoting scripture where, it says two important things, I think. So it is written, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And it is also written, the sins of the father will be visited unto the children. Or does it say parents? I actually am not sure. But I'm sure someone can look that up independently of me having to tell them that. So actually, I'm not sure about that second thing there. Um, so I'll go look it up immediately, as I also wanted to look up something else that I went past without billion. I wanted to look up billion. What's the difference between an American billion and a British billion? And I've got an American and a British dictionary, so I should be in the best circumstance to be able to get down to the bottom finally of when it says that there are 7.8 billion people on the planet. I can actually know what that means instead of just it being a kind of a vagary, um, because that's quite a mystical, confounding sort of thing to know that there's 7.8 billion people, but like, is that 780 million? Is it like seven 780 million or 7,800 million? You know, is it 7,800 million? Is that what it is? Or is it 700? I think it must be 780 million, because you see, you can't use India and China to work it out because they have their population measured in the billions already, so that takes them out the equation. So you have to know that the rest of the world, so apart from India and China, which supposedly take up 36% of the planet, like I know Africa's got a large population. So yeah, I mean, I guess I don't really know what the proportions really are. It'll be interesting to see like what proportion of the world population is each country, roughly by the land mass, roughly by obviously you can't really compare land with land because this, the weather is different, the conditions are different, the terrain, the topography is different. It's see, I never studied geography properly, so, but I mean, I know this from a bit from being influenced by people who are, sort of broad-minded people, like sort of classicists and things like that. Um, which sort of has a kind of sociological sort of rhyme to it. Anyway, so I wonder, if it doesn't say the parent, the sins of the parents, if it only says the father, what is the father? Because maybe the father was actually a kind of some kind of adultery or an adulteration that was essentially being homogenized to a locale instead of being homogenized to the earth, like being homogenized to the appearance of conditions which weren't real but were culturally imbibed and then normalized and then used as a stable noun when it's not even a noun. And so you've kind of got like a broken chain, sort of praying, playing broken telephone when you don't know if you're praying or you're playing, like because you don't know the concept that's actually that other people are referring to because it's a homonym or a homophone. Actually, what's the difference between a homonym is just spelt the same. A homophone sounds the same, and some words are both homonyms and homophones. And then you've got a kind of quadruple bind of, because you've got at least two different stable possibilities maybe within the context, but then you can't exactly discard the other ones because you don't know if the other person is meaning the word in a kind of in a misuse in a is meaning the word in which they don't even know which way it blows. They don't know how it goes under and over, the rainbow, So it's like they are saying the same thing, but they're meaning the opposite, So essentially, like because their whole orientation, their worldview, their framework, it doesn't have the same values as you do. It doesn't have the same reason, and some people essentially don't even, um, their reason is confounded because they're underwater, as it were. So, when we watch Star Trek, we only see Starfleet. We don't even know what like the planet Earth is really like, and we see some of that at the beginning of the Picard series. Anyway, I mean that's just in my view what we should be aspiring towards, as it were. Even though there's still, in my view, a market on the planet but it's a different kind of, it's a market of people, coordination. Anyway, I mean, I'm not the only one doing things for, stepping towards the establishment of institutions that will hopefully provide safe harbor for those of us that don't like being surrounded by people who are, just playing silly little games, perhaps ad infinitum, who knows, can you teach a man to fish, and there are all these sort of little kind of, I mean, I'll have to make a separate recording on this, but this is more about the Grannon question. Yeah, now I'm sorry, because I've been meditating on the Grannon question the whole time, and I've got like at least either 6 or 8 hours or 5 or 8 hours, something like that. Because I'm not sure maybe there's some overlap in all of this as well. Anyway, I must actually start uploading this and stop making addendum after addendum after addendum.